Once we can start swinging things around, of course, we'll have to be careful that we leave enough room so no one gets hit by their neighbor. So let's see. Some things to know. This class is Circle Sword. This is the foundation class, so it'll be sort of the beginning stuff. Then we'll have an advanced class where we'll go back and revisit a lot of things and add some extra power to the shots and some subtlety and stuff. I like to say that, put in a disclaimer, that there are a lot of different styles of fighting in the SCA. You'll see a lot of people explain how they fight and what they do in very different ways. What I have seen in the many years I've been in the SCA, though, is that top fighters have kind of started gravitating towards a certain set of movement patterns. And they may understand what they're doing in a different fashion or teach it in a different fashion, but the actual way they're moving their body and the way they're moving the sword on the field ends up looking very similar among successful fighters. There are some exceptions. East Coast versus West Coast, there's some pretty major style differences, but slowly people are kind of gravitating towards one successful style. Circle Sword is a way of understanding those movements, a way of thinking about them. It's not a unique way of moving. It's actually moving just like all those other guys. It's just explaining it in a way that makes it easy to understand and easy to train. So what is a Circle Sword style? A Circle Sword style is an approach to sword work that interprets all movements of the sword in terms of circles. The goals of that kind of a style is a reduction in joint strain by having a clear follow-through for every blow. Reduction of antagonistic muscle tension resulting in faster blows. Your body knows if you're setting it up to get hurt. Like if you were to go up to an electric stove, you've never seen one before, and it's got this pretty orange thing, you reach out and touch it, you know, it's not going to be any big deal to the moment you touch it. Then there's going to be a lot of pain involved, and if someone says, hey, I dare you to touch it again, how easy is that going to be to do? Your whole body's going to want to stop you from doing it, right? It's the same thing with injuries in fighting. When you throw a shot that you don't have a good follow-through plan for it, and you hit the guy, it's great. And then you throw that shot and you miss your opponent and you don't have a follow-through and you crank it and you hurt your elbow and it hurts really bad for a couple weeks, but you're young, you heal, you get better. Your body remembers how you hurt yourself. And the next time you go to throw that blow, antagonistic muscle tension is going to try to prevent you from throwing quite as hard and quite as fast because your body's afraid of getting that pain again. And by antagonistic muscle tension, what I mean is, like, I can move my hand really easy, or I can make it really hard on myself, just by using opposite muscles around the joint. And your body will do the same thing. It'll put the brakes on because it's afraid. It says, your conscious brain is dumb. You're going to try to do this thing again, aren't you? But your subconscious is going, you're going to get hurt. Don't do it. It's going to slow you down. Now, if you train and you learn follow-throughs where your body gets some confidence that, hey, you were smart about this. Every time you throw this blow, there's a nice place it can go. If it misses, that's not going to hurt. It'll relax. It'll let you throw faster. We'll develop an understanding of how blows travel and generate force that allows a lot of different blows to be understood using the same foundations of movement. There is a tendency in some schools of fighting to teach, 101 different secret blows, and you learn this fancy shot, and then today we're going to learn the snap, and tomorrow we're going to learn the offside, and they're all kind of discrete and separate from each other. That's a lot to remember. I have trouble remembering stuff like that, so my approach has been to try to understand principles that underlie all those different kinds of blows and patterns that kind of encompass all of them, so that once you learn those principles of movement and pattern, they all kind of tie together. You no longer think of them as separate blows, you think of them as part of a pattern of motion. And we'll want to develop an integrated understanding of blow dynamics, allowing one blow to smoothly transition into another and for blocks to be fluidly combined with blows. We'll talk about more of that as we get into the advanced class. One result of this method is that the sword can be used for both offense and defense, rendering the shield a luxury. Shields are great. I like to think that if your shield is not available to make the block, though, you can pull the sword. Hey guys, come get a stick and a whirligig. Stick and a whirligig. Woo.
Yeah.
You're late. Oh, okay. Well, I won't give you. Well, I might give you a thing.
I can do that.
So go ahead and stand over there. Ask if this approach to fighting is actually a period way of fighting, and the answer is maybe and a little bit. I mean, for me personally, I want to kill people in the SCA, so my idea in the end is to be a better fighter and win tournaments with a stick in my hand. But I have an interest in medieval fighting, and I've been finding that some of the things I learned when studying medieval materials applies well and lets me win more in the SCA. So it's slowly started to come together. And a lot of people are making that same discovery. A lot of what's in this class that forms the foundation really comes directly out of a manual. They just call it the 133 manual. This is what the museum named it. But it's out of the late 13th century. They found it, well, it was originally written while in a monastery. Eventually it ended up in someone's private collection. It's got color plates of people and poses and pretty good text in German explaining what's going on. It's a sword and buckler manual, but in the very beginning it talks about places from which sword blows can be thrown, and then how those blows move and end in other places. And we're going to be going through that whole section as part of the foundation class. So that comes right out of a period source. The whole circle thing, they don't really talk about circles in that. They don't really get into detail about how you move a sword. Probably everybody had a pretty good idea of how to chop with an axe and maybe even chop with a sword by the time they got their hands on that manual. A later period manual, out of SCA period, George Silver's Paradoxes of Defense, he's fighting with, everybody else was switching to rapiers, and he was still fighting with what amounted to a broadsword. And he talks a lot about compassing blows. Compass the blow from here to there, compass the blow from here to there. My interpretation of that in context is that he is talking about throwing a circular shot. So it gives a little bit of credence to the idea that maybe that represents how people have been handling swords for a long time. We're going to go into a lot of detail on what to do with a sword. So I like to kind of explain that this class doesn't really cover absolutely everything about fighting, even though it seems to be attempting to. It really covers a third of what you need for fighting. A third of the physical knowledge that you need for fighting. What's missing in this class, and we might cover it at the end if we have time actually, footwork. Footwork is awesomely important to your fighting, and we're not going to deal with it much in this class. Shield work. Shield work's important too. And physical conditioning. These days, weekend warrior, probably not going to go to the top echelons in SCA fighting. You're going to have to train if you really want to get up there. Finally, I like to kind of put this in perspective as far as learning this. Learning how to fight, especially this part of fighting, is like learning your ABCs. It's like learning how to read. So we're going to start with ABCs. We're going to start with little elements. When you're learning how to read, you go from ABCs to phonetics, and you start building a vocabulary of words. Then you start reading simple books. Eventually you get into advanced reading and writing, and you're no longer thinking about ABCs anymore, are you? You're not going, okay, what's this letter, what's that letter, or phonetics. You're not even thinking about words eventually. You're thinking about what is the meaning of this paragraph that I just read. And it's the same with fighting. Even though in this class we're pretty much going to be talking about ABCs and words, it's only going to really benefit you in your fighting if you train it enough that when you're actually fighting, you're not thinking about these ABCs anymore. You're not thinking about these words. You're thinking about what is the meaning of this fight that I'm having? What is the engagement? What is my opponent's intention? What is my intention? It's at that level that the fight really takes place. You know, for a while, when you're beginning, you're going to be thinking ABCs, but just like learning how to read, repetition, eventually that stuff falls out of your brain and you start just going for the meaning of the fight, and your body will know what to do. So that's where you have to head with this. So, you know, it's a 4-hour class, but it's really going to be a whirlwind. We're going to cover a lot of material. All I'm doing is giving you the ABCs. You have to train it and work with it over and over and over until your body knows it and you stop thinking about it for it actually to benefit you. In fact, for a while it'll mess up your fighting because you'll be thinking about ABCs while you're fighting, which is a sure way to get hit. But it's the only way to get better eventually. Also, I like to point out the difference between a toolbox and a craftsman. What we're developing here are tools. And any craftsman would rather have a good toolbox than a sparse toolbox. But still, there is the level of learning craftsmanship, thinking about strategy and fighting. You have to become a craftsman to use these tools well. All right. So let's go with techniques. We've got a wide variety of people here. Some are very new to fighting, and some have been fighting for a while. So I'm going to cover some things that are very much beginner stuff, but maybe the more experienced fighters will pick up a few
Always
things
good to have a review.
as well. What's that?
Always good to have a review.
Indeed. Okay, a couple universal rules for stances and for footwork, which is kind of a stance in motion. The knees should always be inside of the placement of the feet. That allows for faster changes of direction. Let me demonstrate what I mean by this. An example of this not being the case is this. My knee is beyond where my foot is. My foot is closer to my center than my knee is. At that point, it is harder for me to move well from there, and it is a strain on the body. If you're here, however, the knee is inside of the foot, I can move faster. To move in this direction, all I have to do is release the pressure of my foot, and I'm immediately moving in that direction. So that can be side to side, any kind of a stance. You don't want to be, out over. Keep your knees a little bit inside. The nature of being inside is it's like you're a chair. You take away one of the legs, you're immediately falling in that direction. And falling is movement. That's the easiest way to get your body in motion, especially when you're wearing the weight of armor. Even more important, universal rule of footwork and stances, and I've got this in big capital letters in my notes. Toes always point the same direction as knees. And this is one that even experienced fighters sometimes screw up, and it messes up their knees and it messes up their fighting and their force transmission. A lot of your power comes from the ground, and we'll talk about that in the advanced class. But it's important that the knees and toes point the same direction. It sounds simple enough, but why do people mess it up? Well, let me tell you. When people turn, this is where it goes awry. So I'm standing here and I want to go that way. If I turn like this and I leave my foot on the ground, but I allow my hips to turn, it drags the knee. Now the knee's out of line with the toe. That is a moment of awkwardness that I want to avoid. It's bad for the knee, it's bad for force transmission. So there are two solutions to that happening. One solution is to leave the entire leg behind as you step. This is a solution that comes out of Tai Chi. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. So when you step and turn, I open this hip joint so that the knee and the foot stays in place as I make my turn. So the body turns, but the leg stays completely behind. After I've readjusted my stance, I can readjust that leg at my leisure. So that is one solution. The other solution is to allow the foot to pivot on the ground as you turn. Either solution is fine, and there are times where you'll do one and there are times where you'll do the other. But the important thing is that you become sensitive to always keeping your knees in line with your toes. When you take your stance, certainly, in the beginning, that's your first evaluation. Whatever kind of stance you want to take, think about lining those up. But then as you move, if you start to feel tension in your knees, examine what you're doing and think about, am I leaving the foot behind and turning the knee? How can I fix that? Ways to fix it: allow the foot to move or leave the whole leg behind. All right, so let's talk about stances. Throughout the class, you're going to have to stand some way while you're swinging sticks around. If you're already an experienced fighter, I recommend standing in kind of a shallow stance, whatever stance you usually fight in. That's fine. If you're less experienced, I would suggest using the square stance, which is the first one we're going to talk about, because the square stance is kind of symmetrical. You'll have as much ease in moving in one direction as another direction, so it won't get in the way of you learning your sword work. When you're actually fighting, you probably will choose other stances as you're fighting. So a square stance, if my opponent is here, the square stance is just facing straight towards my opponent. My toes and my knees are pointing towards my opponent. It could be, a kung fu horse stance kind of thing, or it could just be standing like this. That's a square stance. The strength of a square stance is that it has balanced rotational availability in both directions, which means I can rotate my body as far this way as I can rotate this way. It's excellent for lateral movement, so if my opponent's here, I can move to the side this way. I can move to the side that way. That's pretty handy against a kneeling opponent. I like a square stance against a kneeling opponent because you're able to step and get deep around for stuff. So we're going to talk about this with all three stances I'm going to talk about. There are strengths. There are also weaknesses to each stance. The weakness to a square stance is that it's slow for forward and backward movement. When I'm here, I have to shift my weight and step to go forward or backwards. I can't just release the weight on my foot. If I release the weight on my foot, I go sideways. So it's slower for getting back and forward. When you're fighting standing, that's a pretty big disadvantage. Sometimes you just need to get your head out of the way when someone swings at you. So having a slow back and forth can be a problem. And it exposes both legs to attack. So when I'm facing my opponent here, if I'm in a square stance, he can throw it this leg and he can throw it this leg. They're both available, which means when I have to defend myself, I got to worry about blocking over here and I got to worry about blocking over there. So it makes it harder for me defensively. There are variations to the square stance. Knees and toes can be in for rotational power. This is a weird one, but it works. So here's sort of a basic square stance. Keeping the knees and the toes aligned, I can turn both the knees and the toes in a little bit. It's knock-kneed stance. This is a stance you'll actually see in Wing Chun, a Southern Chinese Kung Fu. They developed it for being able to fight in small spaces, like on boats and things. So they needed a very stable stance that didn't spread out. It's not, eagle claw, big stances and stuff. It's little stuff for standing in a little boat. Interesting things about this stance. First of all, you can feel that you really root into the ground closely with it. And because you're already turned this way and this way, you can rotate farther in each direction while the knees track over the toes rather than straining to go out of line with the toes. An interesting application of this stance is in something like a holmgang, which is fighting in a small circle. It's supposed to represent fighting on an iceberg. If you step out of the circle, you're dead. So I've seen big guys have trouble because when they take their stance, they're already just about out of the circle because they take up so much space. If they lock in with a knock-kneed stance, they can get that same firmness that they're used to having to back up their sword blows while taking up less room. So it's an interesting application of it. Knees and toes out is another variation of a square stance. This really locks you in place. It takes up a lot of room. Not so good for sword fighting, I don't think, but say you're fighting with a pole arm, what you really need is a solid base to lever that big pole around from. This can be a very solid base to work from. The other thing about a square stance, we've mostly talked about it if I'm facing my opponent being square on, you can actually take that square stance and turn it at an angle to your opponent. So it can still be a square stance essentially, but it doesn't necessarily have to be facing directly towards your opponent. And characteristics change when you turn it. All right. So other stances. There's the right lead stance. This is the primary stance I tend to use. With the right lead stance, you can take a square stance, step forward with your right foot, turn your right toe in a little bit, turn your left toe out a little bit, get your toes and knees aligned. And shift your weight until it's a little bit more in the front leg than in the back leg. And that's a good right lead stance. The strengths of a right lead stance is that you've got more power for your offside shots. The reason for that is you've got a lot more wind up over in this direction to deliver this shot. Okay. You've got longer sword reach. This side of my body is closer to my opponent. So I've got a shoulder width closer because I'm in a right lead stance. If I reverse the feet, I've lost my shoulder width, and I lose a good foot and a half. So right lead stance gives you more reach. It moves the near leg out of range against a right-handed fighter. So if I was in a left lead stance, look how close that leg is for him to throw at. If I'm over here, he's got farther to reach, and I've probably got a shield hanging here somewhere vaguely in the way. So it's a more awkward shot for him to get to my forward leg. It has excellent maneuverability with power, especially front and back. When you have a right or a left lead stance, if you release the weight on one of your feet, you're immediately moving forward. Or if you push with that foot and release on your back, you're immediately moving back, which can be really important, getting your head out of the way. And it's easier to block onside shots. So a basic onside snap coming around to this side of my head, I'm kind of facing this direction already. So blocking is pretty easy there. It's not like the offside where I've got to turn and it's kind of awkward. Onside shot tends to be people's fastest, hardest shot, so it's nice to make that one easy to block. Okay, so it has weaknesses. We've kind of touched on them as we described the strengths even. It has less power for onside shots. So the shots coming from this direction, I can't wind up as much for these shots. So they are weaker by nature from a right lead stance. We'll talk about some ways to overcome that, but it's still part of the nature of that stance. It takes a bit more energy to hold the shield up. Your shield's kind of over here, hanging out in the air so you can cover that leg. That takes more energy than having your shield in close. There's less sword freedom when you're in close. So right lead stance, I've got this extra reach, but if we end up really close, that becomes a problem. It's hard to get my sword room to move when I'm in with the right lead. And it's more awkward to block the offside shots. So just like the onside shots are right here, they're easy for me to block. The offsides are kind of this awkward twist off to the side.
And it's horrible against left-handers.
Yeah, it's very dangerous against left-handers.
Boy, stop looking at me like that.
You can like the reach, but you've got a bunch of weaknesses. Like now, this leg is the easiest leg for them to hit. If they've got a real deep wrap on this side, it's really hard to get over there and block them. Depends on the lefty. Some I really like the stance. It's what I'm comfortable fighting in, so I use it against some lefties. But other lefties who are really deep around with their wraps, you just can't do it. You got to switch.
No wonder you have to do it.
Okay, so some variations of a right or a left lead stance. The stance can be narrow for movement. What I mean by that is, as far as side to side, if he's my opponent, narrow means it's this way. So this gives me really good front and back movement. Okay? Or it can be wide for rotational force. Wide is getting wider this way. It's still a right lead stance, but now I've got more power with twisting, and I'm able to make more lateral steps from the stance. It can be longer for stability. So like this, I've got this triangle coming up to the hips. I can take a charge, say in a war fighting scenario. I can brace from there. Or it can be very small front to back, so you've got more step. You can cover more ground when you step. If I'm already wide, how far can I step? Not very far. I'm already stretched out. If I'm narrow, I can step farther. Let's see. One other variation is if you're in right lead stance, you can turn the right knee and the right toe in and come up on the ball of your foot. This is like a boxer stance. It gives you good power to drive from. You can drive out using your calf muscle. It makes you real springy. You'll also feel in this stance, though, you're under constant tension. It takes energy to hold this stance, and it's very unstable side to side. So it has pluses and minuses, for sure. All right, so lastly, as far as stances, we'll talk about the left lead stance. Left lead stance is exactly the mirror image of the right lead stance, except for your left side's forward now. Left lead stance, you got more power for onside shots. Got this big wind-up for things coming this direction. You've got good maneuverability for all the same reasons that the right lead stance has good maneuverability, front and back. You've got more sword freedom in close. So now, I can't get any closer than this, but I still have lots of room to wind up my sword back here with a left lead stance. Your shield can be easier to hold if you're assuming you're right-handed. You just have it right up against your body here. You've got it covering the leg that's up front. So it's tucked in as opposed to reaching out all the time. Let's see. It's easier to block offside shots. So if your opponent gets tricky and they throw one of these over here, it's like, oh, it's right in front of me. So the weaknesses, you're probably starting to see a pattern here. The weaknesses are going to be less power for your offside shots, because you can't wind up as much for them. Less sword reach. You've lost the width of your shoulders in your reach. Your near leg is now the one that's in range. So here I am. If I get my shield over here or something, this is like the easiest shot in the world for me. It's really close and fast. And it's more awkward to block sword side shots. Or, yeah. So onside shots are like way over here. They're hard to block. The variations are the same as they are with the right lead stance. You can be wide, you can be long, you can be short, you can be narrow, for all the same reasons. I suppose you can come up on the toe and drive from there. I've seen that. One interesting variation that's different about the left lead stance that isn't true so much for the right lead stance is, I won't do it to you because you're lefty, this won't be true. But with the left lead stance, it does set you up for a useful spin, which is going where the shield isn't.
Oh.
Against you, it would be hitting right into your shield, so you wouldn't use it against the lefty.
That is cool, though.
Yeah.
And it's not true for a right lead
we,
stance.
we don't see that very much.
No. Oh, okay.
Saw Berengar try it on me, didn't we?
Interesting thing that Berengar does, the thing about the spin is there's kind of this telegraph as you throw, but he'll throw the telegraph as a feint, so he won't actually spin, which is sort of interesting.
Yeah, he'll do that.
It's impressive.
Be like, what?
It's not like a half balance trying that.
All right.
Don't you just clobber
I'm
him?
not even going to go
No.
there. I'm going to end up on my face.
So let's talk about swords now. Zones or lines of attack, places where you might get hit, for instance. You've got the high outside zone, that'll be over here. High inside zone, low inside zone, low outside zones. This is just sort of terminology. We're going to get into thinking about where we might hold our sword to throw blows from, though, and that's going to sort of revisit the same areas with different terminology. So this is how we're going to refer to it for the rest of the class. When I say high right, It's going to be over here. For you, it's going to be high left. You're going to have to translate.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Like that. Okay.
Yep. Just mirror image it.
Okay.
So high right, you think high left. Okay.
Trust me.
High left, it's over here.
That would be high.
Low left, it's down here. And low right, that's over here somewhere. And high center. You deal with that a little bit. It's right up in there. Okay. So we've got essentially 4 angles of attack. The angles of attack are horizontal, anything that comes straight across this way, parallel to the ground. Vertical, it's the straight up and down line of attack. Diagonal, that's coming across. And diagonal the other way. Okay, so 4 angles of attack. These angles could go in either direction. The angles of attack are artificial but a useful distinction. Each angle represents a generalization of all the angles near it, but it helps define the follow-through and the return for all the blows in that zone. All the angles can be flattened or made a little more vertical, as is appropriate to the circumstances. You want to hit where the opening is. Okay, so let's skip ahead a little. By the way, these notes are available online. I'll give you a little slip of paper at the end of the class that'll have the website. It's www.circlesword.com.
Yep.
Yeah. So these notes are available there as PDFs. There's a few things in the notes that we won't cover in the class, like terminology as far as describing guards.
Is it okay if I link that to the CP site?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's there to be used. It doesn't get updated as much as I would like to, but the basic material is there. There are pictures. All right, so we're going to talk about 5 of the 7 basic guards that are covered in the 133 manuscript and show how they apply to SCA fighting. The exact placement of these guards is not really important. The idea is to get sort of a generality and how to throw from there. So let's talk about the first guard, that's high right. This is the most common one we've seen in the SCA right from the beginning. High right could be up like this. High right could be sitting right on the shoulder like this. I've seen both in the SCA. This is actually how it shows up in the manual itself, but really anything in this zone is coming from your high right zone. A high left guard, that's just the opposite. It's over here on the other shoulder. It could be resting on the shoulder. It could be up in the air. Anything thrown from this area over here is coming out of your high left. You don't see this much in the SCA, and part of the reason for that is most people have a big shield, and the big shield is in the way of throwing out of that guard. Especially with a heater shield, where you've got the point and it straps to your arm. So it didn't really come up, it didn't evolve like everything else evolved in the SCA so much. You're starting to see it more now, though. And what happens is, like with the center grip round, you can get it out of your way. And so you'll see people that are hammering away over here, and they'll just kind of go to here and then cut from there. And they may not even be thinking about that as a guard position, but it is essentially, just as much as this is a position to start a blow from, this is an equally good position to start a blow from, if your shield's out of your way. All right, so we got high right, high left. We also have low left. That's down here. Not seen in the SCA very much for all the same reasons. With a buckler, however, this becomes a perfectly valid spot to throw a blow from. And we have, by the way, this one over here, it could be all the way up here under the arm, or it could be all the way down here by the hip or thigh. Anywhere in that zone is a fair place to throw a low left shot from. So the last, well, not quite last. The next one is low right. Now low right, in the manuals, period manuals, you will tend to see it like this, with the point down. My experience in the SCA is it's hard to hit hard enough in the way that we like to hit in the SCA from this position. I find that if you bring the tip up more to here, you get a longer swing to the target, and you're more likely to score a good hit. So I teach low right as being like this. The blows are going to be coming through that low right zone from there, but the position is actually relatively high with the tip up. You will see this in period illustrations, especially for horsemen. They'll be riding along, and their sword will be right there. And it's nice for doing the old swing.
Take the head off the peasant.
Yep. And then lastly, high center. High center could be like this. It could be like this with the tip back some, but your hand somewhere right above your head there.
But that even goes all the way back here, right?
Sure, it could.
It's just along that line.
This one becomes a confusing shot because this one, depending on how your brain is thinking about it, could be high center or it could be high right. It could even be high left.
This
Varric
way.
likes to throw off that offside. All right, so a little lecture about these. Although a full understanding of circle theory will allow us to throw cuts made in any direction from any guard, actually from almost any position, it's useful to first understand the simplest and most intuitive cuts from these 5 positions. By training these first as individual cuts, we will gain 2 things. First, we'll get the ability to make effective single cuts through a target, ending in a safe position without sticking our own sword in our leg or shoulder, etc. Yeah, not so bad when you're in armor and you're using a stick, but if you ever decide to hack something up with a hatchet or a steel sword, it'll suddenly become very important that when you hit that thing, you've been hacking away at it, when you finally break through, that you have a plan as to where that weapon's going to go, so it doesn't just jam into your toe or your knee or whatever. And so what we're going to be drilling is how to throw from one position to another position. Your sword always has a place to go. Second, we learn how and where to naturally stop the movement of the sword so that it can be redirected to a new angle of attack without strain. We'll illustrate this so it'll all make sense, don't worry. Once we have gained the benefits of understanding sword blows in this fashion, we will expand our understanding with full circle theory, which, while seeming to break these rules, actually will simply add a great many additional options to them. Once fully understood, circle theory is a simpler concept than these basic cuts. We'll drill these basic cuts first so as to gain the first 2 benefits, single cuts and natural stopping points, before they're lost in the bigger world of circles. Notice that we're not going to be adding any body dynamics to add force to these sword cuts yet. This is easier to grasp once we start talking about full circles. After understanding full circle theory, the various elements of adding power to these basic cuts will become instinctive. One last item before we start swinging sticks around. I'd like to explain why we're using these sticks instead of everybody bringing their SCA stick. One reason is these have no wrist restraint getting in our way. Depending on what kind of a cup hilt you have on your sword or what kind of half gauntlet you wear, you may find that you can't go through these motions so well. It gets in your way. Once you understand what it is we're doing and how it works, you may decide you need to redesign your half gauntlet or change your cup hilt or whatever. You really need to be able to move the sword smoothly for this system to work well for you. The other reason we're using these is they're not too hand heavy. With an SCA sword with a basket hilt on it, depending on how heavy that basket hilt is, some of them the balance is way back here by the hand. This is a style of fighting that has to do with using efficient motion so that we can move a heavy stick that has some weight out there on the cutting end efficiently without it causing us any problems. The fact is, if the weight's right here in the hand, you're not going to be able to do this stuff very effectively because you have nothing to swing. You need the balance to be somewhere out here at least. It can't be right up by the hand. So these have a neutral balance point. Another good reason that we're using these instead of regular sticks is this has a clear edge and flat. And at least when you're starting your training, you really should get a feel for hitting with the edge of the thing. It's okay if you think of SCA fighting as just a stick sport, I suppose, but we're supposed to be learning how to be swords people. And with a sword, it's very important that you hit with the edge and not the flat of your blade.
Won't it break if you hit the flat?
Could, yeah. And if, even worse, if you make a hard swing that is slightly flat, it'll twist out of your hands. So it's really important to learn how to put the edge in line correctly. The other reason we're using these is that they're lighter. And the reason that is good is this. When you throw a blow at speed, centrifugal force will support the weight of the tip of the weapon. As it swings around, you don't feel the weapon pulling towards the ground on you because centrifugal force is supporting it. It's moving quickly, right? I recommend learning how to do your blows, though, and practicing some things slowly. So when you move slowly, you don't have any centrifugal force working for you, which means you're constantly feeling the weight of the thing pulling down against you. You're feeling something that you won't feel when you're swinging at full speed. So why put that into the mix while you're training and working on something? So especially when you're doing slow work and working on techniques, using a lighter stick gets rid of that thing that's not going to be there anyways when you're moving at full speed with a heavier stick. All right. So let's talk about basic cuts. We'll walk through them with the sticks. So horizontals, start with your stick over here at high right. Could be on your shoulder, could be up here in the air a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to cut horizontally across the front. Lead with the front edge, going parallel to the ground. Once you've cut through your opponent's neck and you come out the other side, you can allow your sword to turn over and continue on to high left. Let's do that one more time. So here we are over on high right, cutting with the front edge, hits your opponent's neck, comes out the other side, let it turn over, and come over here to high left. So let's throw it a little faster. Here we are in high right. Just try to stay relaxed. And you'll notice that as it comes around, it just kind of naturally stops when it gets over here to high left. And that's true of all of these. As they come through, there's no real strain in stopping when you get to that final point. It seems to be where it's lost most of its momentum anyways. So, next, we've cut horizontally from right to left. Here we are in high left. Guess what's next? We're going to cut from high left to high right. So here we come across, cut with the front edge. After it's passed through the target, to turn over and sail all the way back to high right. So let's repeat that with a little more speed. At this point, we just want to relax, smooth motion. Make sure that you're keeping that front edge forward as you make the cut through the target, and then let it turn over. So now we realize we can go back and forth. So we're in high right. We can cut from high right to high left, from high left to high right. Once again, keep in mind keeping that edge in as you're making the cut. Try to keep it all up at shoulder height. Don't let it dip down like this any. In actual practice, you're going to be needing to cut above the top edge of their shield probably, so it's going to be important to keep the whole thing up high. Another thing to watch is to make sure that the tip is not higher than your hand, or probably even significantly lower than your hand, although lower is better than higher. Just try to get a nice flat cut straight across. Things to focus on, just the relaxation. How comfortable it is when you know where that sword is going, where it's going to end up, where all that force is going to go when you're done. Okay, so we're going to go back and refine things later. But now we have a basic horizontal up high. So let's go to low right. We're going to cut horizontally across at leg height, and then in low left. And let's go back the other way from low left. I'm going to cut across, keeping the edge on, cut through the targets, and end up in low right. Low right is way the heck back there, so let's make this cut. And basically, as it comes around to low right, you just let it go until it can't go any farther. That's low right. Really think about keeping that edge in line as you cut through your targets. Probably hit the left leg, come out the other side of the right leg, and then come through. You've got probably a yard or so that you need to keep that edge in line as it cuts across front. Get a feel for, you swing until it can't swing any farther, basically. You just, and you make, your power comes in the cut, and then when you're done cutting through, you can relax and just let it wind up. This is a good time to talk about something that I picked up a while ago, which I thought was really very interesting. And it sort of applies to this grass cutter cut. Thinking about distance to target. This is my target. It's like right above the knee, right? That's where I'm trying to hit. So if I'm throwing down at this angle, I can reach the target from there. Look how far my hand is from my body. Now there's another angle to this triangle between me and him, which is this angle here. It's shorter, a shorter distance from here to here than it is from there to there on the triangle. Which means, look how close my hand is to my body here, as opposed to how far away my hand is from my body here. It's something that we tend not to think about as fighters. We think, oh, if I need to reach for the leg, we don't realize that we can throw that same leg shot with the hand in closer if it comes straight across. So these cuts that are going from low right to low left, since they're coming straight across, you could end up with your hand staying very close to your body and still have the same reach that you have going at the angle to the leg there. An interesting thing to play around with. The other nice thing about cutting across like this is the shield is probably sitting right here at an angle. We'll talk about why it's at that angle later, actually. But if you're coming like this, you might get under that angle instead of trying to cut through the angle. All right, so those are our two horizontals. We've got horizontal high, horizontal low. Let's talk about diagonals. So high right again. We're going to cut from high right to low left, going diagonally. So here comes the edge. Edge hits the shoulder, comes out at the hip, and wraps up in low left. Okay, let's take it back up there. High right. Here we go. Cutting diagonally across, hits at the shoulder, comes out at the hip, and winds up down here. So now that we're down in lower left, this is a less natural cut, but it has its place. We're going to cut from low left to high right. So here it goes. We're leading with the front edge. Front edge hits the hip, comes out at the shoulder, keeps going up, turns over when it feels like turning over, and let it end up here in high right. So now let's speed them up a little and just get relaxed with the flow. Cut through, and cut back. Remember to lead with the front edge in both directions. Think about what you're hitting so you keep that edge in mind. This probably becomes the most natural cut if you're just hacking at something. The horizontals are more common against people because you're trying to get over the top of a shield, but these diagonals are probably the most natural for hitting something inanimate, or there are times where you can use it against an opponent. It's sort of a funny angle for SCA fighting because people have trained the horizontals so much. All right, so talking diagonals again, let's go over to high left. We're going to cut from high left down to low right. So here it goes. Hits at the shoulder with the front edge, keeps it going on through, comes out the other side of the hip, rolls over to low right. Now from low right, cut to high left. So here we go, leading with the front edge, hits at the hip, comes out at the shoulder, and then turns over when it needs to, and ends up here in high left. So let's cut that line a little bit. Make sure you're leading the front edge. Now some of you are thinking, hey, I can hit with the back edge as I'm coming up from low right to high left, and the answer to that is yes, you can. And we will talk about that later. That would be a wrap shot. But for now, we're going to learn to do it with the front edge because that ties into some other patterns and shots that we're going to learn first. All right. So we've got horizontals and we've got diagonals. Let's go for the near verticals. And I say near verticals because they're actually going to end up off to one side or the other. So we're starting in the center, high center. We're cutting pretty much straight down, but at the very end, we're going to either pull it off to low left or pull it off to low right. Go ahead and try a couple of both of those. Be handy for slot shots and stuff. You got that little slot between their sword and shield. You want to hit right down there, right down into the slot. And you gain power in your shots because you have a follow through. That's like in baseball. When they go like this and they stop, that's a bunt, right? That's intended not to hit very hard. When they want to hit way out there, they follow through all the way to here, right? They hit the ball way over here, for goodness sake. Why do they follow through all the way to here? Because just the way the body works, you're going to hit that ball harder when you're pulling all the way for the full follow through. That's true of your sword blows too. If you're trying to get to that follow through, you'll have more power. With stick fighting, it may stop on your opponent. You may never get to here, and that's okay. But you will still have hit with more power because you were trying to get to there. That's what makes the difference. All right. So there is a true vertical. True vertical straight down. So I said every shot has a follow-through. The follow-through would be really painful on this one. There is an answer to that, though, especially with a SCA stick. If you're throwing straight down, and you might do this against a kneeling opponent, for instance, would be an application, and for some reason you miss, the real answer is just bend your knees a little bit, at which point it will bury the tip in the ground rather than hitting you in the crotch. Don't do it too hard with these because they snap. But with a regular SCA stick, you can bury that tip without hurting it much. And you certainly will hurt you less. All right, so there are two more diagonals that are worthy of note, and these are harder to explain than they are to show. What this diagonal is, I'm over here in high right, but I'm going to cut a diagonal from high left to low right. And I'll show you what happens there. So here I am in high right. All I do is I angle the stick over this way a little bit. It's still in high right, isn't it? It's sitting on my shoulder. But as I start the circle, look what happens. It comes over here, and by the time it's actually hitting something, it's over here in high left. And then it's cutting all the way through diagonally and ending up in low right. So put it over here in high right, aim your pommel over this way, and then cut through from high left to low right. This becomes a good technique of hitting like an offside leg. So even though I'm over here in high right, I can throw for the offside leg, and that's where it's pulling.
Yeah, there you are. Yeah, basically, you can take the pommel, put the fire right, and then fire. Exactly. Still a diagonal cut. You're just starting.
And of course, there is the mirror image to that, which is over here. So you've got it on your high left shoulder, and you're cutting across from high right to low left. Even though you started
You
on
want
low.
to end in the same spot with your hand. So
This one's interesting because if you put your arm up like it's a shield, you can really come in at this angle over here in a way that you can't get to from anywhere else. It's an interesting shot. But if you've got a big shield in your way, it's not going to happen. If you're fighting sword and buckler or something, or fighting single sword, that suddenly becomes available to you as a shot. All right.
what you want to.
All right, so at this point, we could continue to drill more and more obscure combinations of these positions and cuts. Instead, we're going to step back and work on full circle theory. This will allow us to intuitively grasp how many or more obscure cuts, as well as transitioning from one guard to another. It'll also add power to all variety of cuts. One of the great strengths of the circle theory is that a great and many subtle varied movements can be understood on a physical level without having to learn them as separate moves. Circle theory will tie all the moves together into a pattern and allow one to associate the power generating principles with the pattern rather than the individual shot. After we've covered circle theory, you may want to go back and look at those basic cuts and see how can I apply this theory to the basic cuts to add power. Let's see. We'll also explore ward positions can provide a natural stopping point to the flow of a circle, and you can be easily listed to a new position. We're going to cover that more in the advanced. All right, so the basic cuts have been taught as circular shots that trace part of a circle, stemming largely from the shoulder. We'll return to those ideas later in the advanced class, but first, to understand full circle shots and the establishment of a flat plane of movement. To do this, we'll learn basic horizontal cuts. So, let's start with the sword here in high right guard. For this one, we're not going to put it on the shoulder, we're going to lift it up. And we're going to throw it from right to left. Here it comes with the front edge. It turns over, it's all done. Let's let it keep going. Here it is in high left, but instead of stopping there, we're going to keep cycling around until it gets in high right again. And so this becomes a full circle shot. It starts and ends in the same spot. And it can be repeated. And we'll talk a lot more about that. Okay, so let's look at the other direction. Let's start over here in high left. We can cut from high left across. It turns over and let it continue all the way around to high left again. Make sure you're cutting with the front edge as you cut across in front. As much as possible, try to keep the whole thing flat. We'll talk some more about that as well. Okay, so we've sort of established how a circle shot can take place and what it looks like. Something to talk about here is how to hold the sword. As we get into more and more circle stuff, it's going to be really important that you're not holding your sword like a hammer, really hard and stiff like that. You're going to need to be able to shift and move your hand around as you're swinging. For me at least, I find that some of the time I'm holding my sword mostly with my first finger and my thumb. And then on other parts of the same circle, the same sword blow, I may find myself holding the sword more with my little finger against my palm. It kind of alternates, and that's what allows me to move the sword without it chunking around because the hand is gripping it too hard. The wrist is not a 100% flexible joint, and so we need to make up for that with a little bit of flexibility in the hand. So for me at least, when I throw this blow, I'm loose here, I tighten my hand, and then I'm mostly holding with the forefinger and the thumb here, but as it gets out to the end, I start gripping with the little finger and the palm and let it turn over, and then I go back to holding with the forefinger and the thumb. That's how my hand does it. How your hand does it may be different, but we're going to be all aiming at the same thing, which is allowing the sword to move freely in a smooth circle. We'll talk a little more about that later too. So let's talk about that flat plane versus a cone. We got a visual aid here. So what I mean by flat plane is you have to imagine that you have like a tabletop or a shield and you're throwing along that surface. So if this tabletop's up here, these blows travel along the top. I'm not doing it very well. But it would stay in contact with the surface the whole time if your hand was in the center of the circle. And that flat plane could be at any angle. You could be throwing along the surface like this. It could be over here. You could be throwing along the surface here or along the other side of the circle. But it stays in a flat plane. When you're not in a flat plane is coning. So here's a flat plane. Here's coning. See how I'm not on the shield anymore? My hand is in the middle of the shield, but the tip is never touching the shield. It's up here. Now if you do a little bit of coning, you're going to feel how there's strain in the wrist. It's trying to pull itself down into the flat plane. If you go down to the flat plane, you keep your hand loose, it'll just swing around naturally. All that effort where it's trying to pull itself out of the cone and down into the flat plane is wasted energy that's sucking power out of your shots and making you slower. So you ask, why doesn't everybody just naturally learn how to flat plane? Why isn't that how we think a sword blows? Why would anyone ever cone? And the fact is, almost all new fighters cone, and advanced fighters, when they get tense or they get in a hurry, they cone too. And oftentimes they'll be going, boy, I'm having a sucky day. All my shots are coming out awkward and aren't hitting hard enough. And usually the reason is they're trying to hurry and they're coning. And so why does that happen? Well, if my sword is here and I want to hit here, say, this is a shorter distance for my tip to travel from here to here, right? And so I think, part of my brain is thinking, short distance means faster. And it is a shorter distance, but the leverage is so bad trying to make that shot, I'm having to fight against the principles of how the weapon moves, that I can never get up to full speed. I'm not going to be able to be as moving as many miles per hour getting from here to here, even though I've got a shorter distance to travel. If I relax and let that travel in a full flat circle to the target, the tip has to travel nearly twice as far, but your stick will be moving far faster, far many miles per hour faster, and you won't be straining your joints. It'll be a much fluider, natural motion. So what happens is people get in a hurry, they're trying to get it in there faster and harder and shorter distance, and they're working against themselves. If they relax and let the full circle come in, they'll get a much better cut, and it'll get there faster in the end, actually. So it's always something to watch for when you're fighting. If you're finding that you're fighting weak one day or your joints are straining, check it out and see if you're starting to cone your shots instead of keeping them nice and flat. All right, so let's go to the whirligigs. That's the weight on a string thing. You'll notice that each of these whirligigs, everybody have a whirligig? Looks like it. Okay. They have a loop on them. Pass the loop over your wrist. That way, if you let go, it's not going to sail off and hit someone. Notice that these are really hard metal things, and they'll really hurt when you hit yourself with it. And I say when, because everybody does at some point in their lifetime. But it'll also really hurt if you hit one of your friends with it, so please don't. Make sure you spread out enough. You've got room to move. You'll have to move so you don't hit our window. It's all right. Because we're going to be swinging these things around.
Move up, then they can spread out.
I will back up some so there's room for people to play out this way. So, yeah. Okay, so let's start with the basic movement that we were just covering, which would be our onside shot from high right through high left and back to high right. What that looks like with a whirligig is just this. You just swing it around above your head. It's moving from right to left. You're going, wow, this is a lot less complicated with a whirligig than it was with a stick. It takes a lot less description. Everybody knows how to do this. And that's why we go to the whirligig, because this is a very natural motion. There's a bunch of things that we already know about doing this somehow that we don't necessarily know when we put a sword or a stick in our hand. So let's go ahead and wind that down and get the other direction. So we're going to do the offside shot now, right? So that's going to be going from left to right, swinging above your head, the same kind of thing. So, yeah, a little weirder to get started. But there's your offside shot with the whirligig. Now the nice thing about a whirligig is you cannot cone with a whirligig. The whirligig will force you to have a flat arc. So that lets you really think about how that flat arc works. Okay, let's see. We'll go back and talk about some refinements of that movement and what we can learn from it. First, though, I'd like to talk about the differences between the sword and the whirligig. So, the disadvantage of using a sword over a whirligig is that you only have a partially flexible joint between you and the thing you're swinging around. With the whirligig, 100% flexible joint where your fingers pinch the string, right? It makes it really easy to do this. With the sword, you have sort of this imperfect joint between your wrist and your hand and the stick. And we have to learn how to overcome that by using a flexible grip and turning our arm and our wrist in such a way that it allows the sword to move through that natural arc without deviating from its path. One of the advantages of the stick, though, is you can stop it when you want to. Like, if I swing from high right to low left, and I get to here, it's going to go all the way around and continue to hit me, right? Whereas when we did that with a stick, it pretty comfortably just kind of coasted to a stop at the end. We all know that there were medieval weapons that were kind of weighted things on the ends of chains and stuff. They hit tremendously hard. They get nice circles, but they're hard to control. So we do get some control by going with the stick as well. But this is an excellent learning aid to learn about moving in flat arcs. So let's get it swinging from right to left again. That's our onside shot above our head. Let's get it swinging around. Stand comfortably. Okay, I want you to notice some things as you're swinging this around. First of all, there's a tendency to lean away from the weight, which means as the weight's moving around in front of you, you may find your body swaying backwards ever so slightly, and then swaying forwards ever so slightly as it comes around behind you. Emphasize that a little bit and feel how it adds speed and force to the swing with a very small body motion. Very, very small body motion, but it's still important. Same with your sword blows. If you're throwing in a flat, angled shot like this, circularly, a small sway of the body like that actually adds tremendously to the power of the shot. Also notice that as it's going around, if you let go of the string and you didn't have a loop around your wrist, it would zip off that way, right? It would zip off away from you. So what you do is you pull back towards yourself with the handle a little bit as it swings around. That sense of pulling back against the weight of the thing that you're swinging also speeds up the tip of the weapon, or in this case, the weight on a string. That's true of your sword blows too. As you throw a sword blow, even though you're moving it around and forward, your hand is pulling back against the weight of the weapon, and that speeds up the tip and makes it hit harder as well. Notice how small, well-timed motions make a power difference. Swinging around, try to make it swing around really fast once. It didn't take a lot of movement on my part to make that happen, but it just has to be small and well-timed within the rhythm of the rotation, and it'll speed up. And it's the same with your sword blows if you've got a smooth sword motion. You also notice there's a tendency to turn the torso a little. The shoulders shimmy a little bit as it goes around. That's true of your sword blows too. That little turn of the torso can go all the way down into your hips and feet as well. So talking about feet, foot pressure also. As it comes around, notice that as it comes from your right shoulder towards your left, you'll feel pressure in the bottom of your right foot. And then as it's coming around behind you, going from your left to your right behind you, you'll feel pressure in your left foot. Just a little pressure in the whole flat of your foot. If you emphasize that pressure, if you're swinging around and right before it starts going from the right to the left, you push down a little harder with your right foot, it will force your body to turn a little bit and it will speed up that action of the motion. So for an onside shot, a shot coming from your right towards your left, pushing down with your right foot into the ground will speed up your shot. Of course, with the offside blow, it's just the opposite. As you're coming around the other direction, if you push with your left foot as it comes around in front of you, it'll speed up the front direction. Also notice how your hand is leading the circle. You're making these little circles with your hand, and that creates a big circle out on the cutting tip, right? And that's the same for your sword blows too. A little motion here creates a big motion out there when it's all tied and timed together right. The reason I keep emphasizing how little these things are is a lot of times when we put a newbie with a stick in front of a pel, which we try to teach, you need to get some hip action going in your shots, and so we teach this big motion. It's like, turn the hips, turn the shoulder, serve the soup, and it's these giant motions. And that's okay, but it really helps to understand that then you watch Advanced Duke so-and-so, and he doesn't seem to be using his body at all. It's just boom, boom, boom. The fact is, they probably are, but they're using it about as much as we're using it to move the swirly-gig. Very small motions, all timed right, create the same effect, and probably do a better job of creating that effect than the big motions. All right, so let's see. Find it.
Special.
Differences. Okay, let's pick up our sticks again. Oh, okay. Right, before we get to that. Let's do a little drill that lets us think about putting pressure with our feet. I was talking about pushing down with your right and your left foot. If you just stand in a square stance like this, it's sort of hard to explain. What I'm going to do is I'm going to alternate pushing down with the bottom of my feet. And you notice I'm not bending my knees a lot or anything, but I can get myself stepping funny like this pretty easy without any big motion going on. The thing I'm wanting you to get a feel for is that you can push down with those feet without it being any kind of big or complicated motion. You're not having to jam the knees around, you're not having to turn the hips or anything. It's just, you just want to push down with the foot, and it'll force your body into motion. And that's the same for your sword blows. It's just a small thing. So, if you're over here in high right, and we're throwing across to high left, and ending back here in high right, that's this action. Try pushing down with the foot, letting your body turn a little bit, leaning back from the sword, pulling away from the sword. Feel how you can add power to your shot with those subtle things. Remember not to tighten the hand too much, because it'll make it hard to keep the circle. That's another place where you can get coning. If I hold it like a hammer, as I get to here, I'm going to have to do this to get it back into the circle and coming around. And that, I lose all my power and all my flow there. What I want to have happen is I want the sword to rotate on its axis when it needs to rotate and continue on across. So when it needs to turn to keep my arm in with it, it just rotates around its own axis, like that. And the way that happens is by alternating your hand grip and keeping your hand loose so that can happen. So back to adding power. Push down with the right foot, it comes across, and feel how the power transfers. Feel also how you lead the action with a little circle with the hand, this little leading circle, and then when it starts to come out, you're starting to pull away from the tip and you're starting to pull back on that little circle. So you lead the circle and you pull back the circle, and you lead the circle and you pull back the circle. And your body's tied to that little motion as well. Don't worry, we're going to go back and talk about adding power some other ways. So over here in high left now, we're going to cut from high left through to high right and end up back in high left again, a circular shot. But I want you to push down with your left foot right about here to generate force in front. Especially with this offside shot, you'll find as the sword comes out, if you lean back away from that tip a little bit, lean your shoulders back, it'll speed up the tip of your offside shot. It really helps to think about how you're pulling all the way for the fields here in the back. That'll speed up your shot. Think about the little circle with the hand. You lead the shot out, and then you're pulling that circle back again. By the time it's hitting, you're starting to pull back with your hand. All right, so we've got the basic motions. So some things to think about. Power is delivered by involving as much of the body as possible in the sword blow, with priority given to the biggest muscles and masses. So we've talked about little motions, and I stand by that, but the little motions should be fueled by the bigger muscles. So when you put pressure down with your foot, you're engaging this entire leg muscle. That's a great big muscle you can add to your shot. The next muscle in the line, the next big muscle you're going to use for an onside shot is your chest muscle. It's a relatively large muscle. Don't be thinking so much about the arm muscles in throwing your shots. So the chest muscle is making this pull here. Use the big muscle to pull across. And that'll add more power. It's even more so with your offside shot. You need to think about what muscle is driving that. So you've got your leg making this little motion, pushing down with your foot. A little but big muscle motion. The muscle you use for pulling across with this offside shot is the big back muscle that it ties in up here in the shoulder blade and draws all the way into the center of your back. It's a big sheath of muscle that sits back there. That's the big pull this way that you're getting on those shots. Don't think about your arm. Your tricep even is small compared to that big back muscle. Lean back and pull with the back muscle, and that's where the shot comes from. You might think about if you're standing, if you draw your shoulder blades back, feel how that muscle contracts. That's the muscle that pulls that shot. All right. Blow power is the result of speed and mass. Well-developed technique allows faster development of speed, and the weight on a string method allows a sword with more of its mass out on the striking end to be used well. Even a heavy sword with all the weight in the hand will not hit hard. give the analogy of horseman's mace. Okay, so imagine that this is a horseman's mace. A horseman's mace is about as big as a sword. It's a stick with a big heavy ball on the end. Boy, you can really mess people up with a horseman's mace. It's got some severe mass out there to hit with. Now imagine that horseman's mace and grab it by the big heavy ball and hit with the stick. You're not going to be doing nearly as much damage with that, right? And it's the same with a sword. If too much of the weight is here in the hand and there's not some heft out here to hit with, it's going to be hard to hit hard with it. There are some techniques that are developed for fighting with a heavy hand and a light stick, and they rely on generating tremendous tip speed, much like a bullet can do a lot of damage, even though it's just a tiny little piece of lead. It's because it's moving so damned fast that it can generate force. It's a valid way of hitting hard. I recommend going with a weapon that has more of the weight out here. You're hitting a little slower, but you're hitting with more mass to get a good cleaving shot. I think it's easier on a body. The fact that it's moving slower allows you to have more control to make decisions during the sword blow as well. Whereas if you're moving lightning fast with that tip, once you've committed to throwing the blow, there's nothing you can do about it. It's going to go. So I actually think there are advantages to it being slightly slower than the hand-heavy technique. I also think it's easier on the body. It's less sudden and jerky. You're swinging that weight. And we'll see how you can deliver all kinds of blows while swinging that weight. It's one of the differences between Eastern and Western fighting techniques in the SCA, though. There is a tendency on the East Coast to do snapping shots where they pull the hand and they just snap that tip out. I don't know. You won't see it much out west here. I think this technique was developed mostly, the circle theory was developed by looking at Western fighters and trying to understand the underlying principles of how they move. So you will occasionally run into something that seems to run counter to a lot of this. Let's see. Power is reduced when the flat plane of the sword is altered. So that was the difference between being on the table and coning. The more you cone, the more power you lose on your shot. Something to work on when you're working on these shots on your own is relax and get a whoosh. So if I swing this really fast, hear that whoosh out there? Okay, it's easy enough when you swing it really fast. What you want to do is get in a quiet room and see how slowly you can throw that blow and still get the whoosh right out at the cutting end. If you're doing it slowly and you're still getting the whoosh right there where you'd be cutting, that means you're reaching maximum speed right at the point of the cut, which is when you need it. It means that you're throwing smoothly. If you're coning and chunking in your motion, it'll be very hard to get that whoosh, especially at slower speeds. I guess if I do that fast enough, I can get some sound. But if you're going slow, there's nothing there. Whereas a nice relaxed motion that's smooth will get a whoosh. So that's a way of seeing if you're on the right path as far as getting smooth shots. One last thing to talk about is the onside wrap shot. So all our shots that are going from right to left, after they pass through the target with the cutting edge, we're turning them over and returning them to the opposite guard. So using that very same motion, still heading for the very same ending spot, we can turn that into a wrap. And all that happens is, same generation of power, we just let it turn over sooner. So that it hits with the back edge. Now it's drawing with the back edge all the way back to wherever it's headed. So with the horizontal shot, I let it turn over here. Now it's back edge all the way to where it's going. One of the best applications of this is from low right to high left. So that gives you a nice, long, easy wrap that hits and pulls with the back edge all the way for the shoulder. This can be thrown very relaxed and slow. And because it's drawing all the way for the shoulder, you can get enough power on it. Remember I was saying there's advantages to things moving slowly, though? The fact that this is a slower shot and a very efficient shot means that I can cheat. I can get to right here, and I can say, hey, his leg is covered, but his head is open, and lift the hand just a little bit and hit with the back edge of the head instead of the leg. It's still pulling for the same place. I started here, I'm ending here. It doesn't matter if I'm hitting the leg or the head. But if I go here and I lift the hand a little, it becomes a head shot. If I leave it on its original arc, it's a leg shot. So there's a leg shot, there's a head shot. Leg shot, head shot. Leg shot, headshot. When you cheat for the head, you lose a little bit of power, and it becomes absolutely critically important that you're pulling that shot all the way for the back shoulder here. But it can hit plenty hard if you are pulling for the shoulder when you bring it up to the head.
Would you ever step with that?
Yes, absolutely. And once again, because this is such a natural full motion of the sword, you're not tied into being well planted in the ground and rotating your hips or any of that. It's this long motion, so you can be completely off balance and in motion while you're throwing it. I'm still in the air about the time it hits, and it doesn't matter because it's a big, broad motion of the sword. And because you can as easily throw for the leg as for the head, it doesn't matter that it's big and slow and they see it coming. Because if they go for the leg, you hit them in the head. If they block the head, you hit them in the leg. You want them to see it coming. You're just waiting to see how they're going to respond to it. So it sounds like the perfect shot. Why do you kill people with it all the time, you may ask. Any wrapping shot, it takes your sword out of play for a long time. It's not available to you for blocking, so it's a risk. It also involves getting fairly close to your opponent, which can be to their advantage. So there's lots of danger reasons why we don't throw wraps all the time, and those all apply to this wrap as well as other ones. Also, your arm is out here for a long time exposed, which is dangerous. So you got to pick your moment for wraps. But when you see the right time to throw a wrap, this is a really good wrap to use. All right, what time is it?
It's about 12:20.
5. Okay, so we got about a half hour left before lunch. We've got thrusting to cover. That's about right. Okay, so I'll skip this because we're going to cover this in the advanced class just in an hour. So we're going to step away from circle theory now. We're going to come back to it in real detail in the advanced class. That's almost all we talk about in the advanced class. But we're going to step back to fundamentals again. We talked about stuff coming right out of the 133 manuals. We're going to talk about thrusting now. And thrusting is also well represented in the 133. It's very clear that they're thrusting there. So absolutely in the 13th century, we can point to a picture, point to the text, and say, yep, they were killing people with the points of their swords in the 13th century. We can also look at older stories and writings from the Romans. And the fact is we've been killing people with the tips of swords for a very, very long time. But it's certainly appropriate to broadsword fighting as well. So even more so with thrusting than with cutting blows, it is important to have a stable and rehearsed guard position from which to launch the attack. Similar to cutting, these are not positions to be posed in, but rather they're known positions through which the swordsman moves his or her sword on the way to launching a thrust. Having these rehearsed positions increases accuracy in thrusting and allows one to practice the transition from cutting to blow and from blow to thrust. Many of the techniques illustrated in the 133 manual include a thrust. Several ready-to-thrust positions are illustrated. Several are just implied by the text. We will cover these and a few that I've added for completeness. The added ones are drawn from my own experience, mostly found in later period manuals as well. Before we start thrusting, it should be noted that the sword arm should never fully lock in a straight position at the end of the thrust. Always thrust to a slightly bent position, stopping under your own power. Do not rely on hitting your target to stop your thrust. This is done to protect your elbow. Unlike cutting, a thrusting action will not have as much momentum and leverage against your joints as to necessitate a follow-through in circular paths. So, when I get this mass moving like this, stopping it suddenly, there's a lot of leverage and centrifugal force working against my joints, and that's really hard. Moving in this kind of a line, not so much. It's actually pretty easy to stop the action, so we don't have to worry about hurting ourselves. The important thing, though, is that you don't rely on hitting something to stop your action. There's a couple reasons for that. One is, first of all, if I rely on hitting them and then I miss, I'm surprised. Too late, I realize I've locked my elbow and hurt my joints by missing. The other thing is, while this is a great threat, this is an invitation to hit me in the head. It's a very bad thing to over thrust. So what I recommend is, pick that point you're going to thrust at, about 3 inches inside their skull or whatever, and thrust to that point, and whether you hit it or not, that's where your hand stops, and you pull it back. You don't go beyond that if you've missed. And you don't stop on the face if you do hit. You keep pushing for that spot. So you figure where you're gonna land that shot.
Is that because you're wearing armor?
What's that?
Is that because you're wearing armor that puts so much tension on your joints to lock it like that?
Yeah, have your weapon too.
And,
And you just want to generally develop this idea of you never lock the elbow, and that's true for fencing too. You know, it's an extension, but not a locked extension, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're aiming for is that relaxed extension. All right. Let's see here. So positions to thrust from. Oh, let me go back and recap something that we mentioned here too. That the positions are not to be posed in. This is something they talk about in 133 a lot, and I think we'll go back and revisit it, especially if we do some buckler stuff. But this position here is a threat, and we're so used to seeing this in the SCA, we can think of this as a static position, and that's fine. But if I do this, you know, for instance, he's pretty sure what I've got planned. I'm going to throw on this side over here, and you can get ready for that, right? If I go here, he's got a pretty good idea of what I might throw from here. We've seen so much of this that it can mean so many things. It's not quite as much of a tell. But the idea that they put forth in 133 is that you've got neutral positions that you might start your engagement in, or you might make a threat in one of these, knowing that you're telling them, hey, I'm going to hit you on that side over there, and see how they respond to it. But you don't want to always give away what you're planning to do. So you often start in a neutral position, and then right before hitting with this shot, I move to the position I want to throw from, and I throw the shot, all in one motion. So even though I threw the shot from high right to high left, I started somewhere neutral. I move to high right, throw the shot, end in high left. Instead of starting out, okay, I'm going to hit you over there. Are you ready? You ready to block that? You know, you don't want to do that for your
Now,
opponent.
is there, because I've been called on this
Mhm.
for years. I'll be here,
Mhm.
and before every one of my shots, I go to here. And so the person I'm fighting sees this and knows.
Yeah, you know,
It's just
I used to think that totally, and try to like get all of that telegraph out of my game. Then I started seeing something evolve in the SCA and fighters like Duke Duncan and Duke Shawn. And like Duke Shawn is one of the fastest, hardest fighters that I've met. And when he is fighting someone that he's got speed on, he'll fight from here, nice and relaxed. He'll throw his shots from here. But most of the when he feels even slightly threatened by his opponents, he'll bring a sword up front here, so he's got something to block with, something more static, which means that all of his shots cycle back to the shoulder before they come out. And you would think that would make him slow and predictable. And the fact is, it does not. So that required me to go back and look at it in more detail. And what you discover is, when he pulls back to here, it means that he now has the potential to throw a shot. It doesn't mean necessarily that he's going to throw a shot. You don't know for sure. You just know that he cycled back here, and he'll do this. He'll be faced off, and he'll come back here. And
so I have to stay on guard because.
Yeah, you don't know what this means necessarily. You can't guarantee that he's going to throw a shot when he pulls to there. The other thing is, from here, he can throw all of his shots. So when he goes back to here, even if a shot does come, is it going to be an onside shot? Is it going to be an offside shot? Is it going to be a leg? Is it going to be an offside leg? The mere fact that it's come back to here tells you he might throw a shot. And even if he does throw a shot, you don't know which of the shots it's going to be. So it doesn't tell you much. Additionally, he's trained so that as soon as the hand gets to here, it's in motion. So for him, a shot looks like, if he's in front, a shot looks like this in slow motion. It's all one smooth motion. It doesn't go to here and then stop and then throw. It's all part of the same motion. And while, you know, intellectually it seems like there's a telegraph there, it ends up not mattering when it's trained enough. So I don't think it's a bad thing.
Probably I stop.
You know,
I get to here.
yeah, stopping's probably bad, and you're a fairly new fighter. Everything you do is going to be more obvious. But trying to get rid of that altogether is probably a bad thing.
Yeah.
As you get smoother and faster doing that, it will stop being a disadvantage and it'll be okay. So
It can even be an advantage because he's developed the thing to be a threat when he's here.
yeah,
And so he can pause and go off count, like you're pausing and going off count, throw some sloppy shots, and then set and throw your real shot.
Yeah, or like you say, pause and see how your opponent reacts to it.
yeah,
Aha, that's where it's going.
Like
Exactly.
Conrad and his choo-choo noise.
yeah. And unlike having to feint like this or something where you commit a lot of motion and action to your sword, if you can feint your guy into responding by just doing this, well, that's great. That's a useful tool.
It means he thinks you're a threat.
So it's a good question, and I think rather than trying to get rid of it now, just accept it for what it is and try to get better at it. Make it smoother. Make it so that when you pull your hand back, it doesn't always mean you're going to throw, and make it so that you can throw smoothly from here, back through here, and into the shot. Remember we were talking about the hand leading little circles? Well, look at this little circle. I'm starting here, pulling the hand back in the circle, forward into the circle, back into the circle. I'm making this little like oval circle right here, right? Well, okay, here I am in a nice blocking position. Here I am in a nice shoulder position. Here comes my blow from off the shoulder. all one motion, right? So you start out here, you cock to here, you throw. When it's all in one motion, it's just a little circular action of the hand. You'll see this a lot in folks that do Huthers train too, is they start out front, but there's this little backward cycle as they start the shots. All right, so back to thrusting. Oh, right, that's how we got back to thinking about this. Is that thrusting, we're going to talk about positions that you thrust from. Like, let's say I want to thrust from here. I'm not going to walk up to my opponent. Okay, I'm going to thrust from here. But I might be out here fighting, and what I end up doing is very momentarily pulling to here before leading out the thrust. It's a spot that your hand moves through on the way to the thrust. You may not stop there at all, but you visit that spot before you actually execute the thrust. And it'll give familiarity to your movement and allow you to be more accurate and powerful with your hand. So let's talk about positions that thrust can come from. I said all this stuff about don't pose in the thrust. There is one exception. This is a position right out of 133 that you can pose in. The reason you might pose in it is to offer a threat, something for your opponent to think about. It's not as dangerous to pose in as any of the other thrusting positions, though, and here's why. Imagine a buckler in my hand. This thrusting position is from here. The reason this works as a posed position is because you can keep your opponent from taking control of the tip of your weapon because it's pulled back and you can bring your shield up to protect the tip of your weapon. It's raining. So let's talk about this position. Something that's going on here, right here. I like to call it couched, right couched. And by couched, you can think of couching a lance. Imagine you're riding along, you got this big lance in front of you. With a lance, you put it under the arm, and you bring your hand up underneath, and you support the weight of the lance with your hand underneath. And you notice that your elbow and your hand and the tip of the weapon are pretty much in line. That's going to be true even as I'm holding it as a sword, and I bring it to here. Okay, so the hand is facing up. It's resting in the palm. The elbow, the hand, the tip are all in line. Notice that the weapon is braced against your body. That gives you stability with a heavier weapon. I've actually got a sword I can demonstrate this with today. Nice thing is, with a real sword with a quillion, is you actually create a two-way bridge here, where the quillion is braced against you and the pommel is braced against you. That gives you a heck of a lot of control on that heavy weapon. And it's back far enough that you can protect the tip if they're trying to take a swing at the tip of your weapon. So this is actually one you can pose in. It's an interesting thing about this for fencers is that this position is the same as a fencing on guard, except for you've pulled the hand back. Notice the position of the hand. Bring it forward, and it becomes a fencing on guard. The hand is up. You got this gentle curve. The elbow, the hand, the tip are all in line. You retreat that until it hits the body. That's a right couch position. So all the years of evolution in fencing, they found that this, when extended with a much lighter weapon, is a very effective place to control and use the weapon for thrusting. You've got much of the same advantages back here rested against your body, more control because it's a heavier weapon, able to protect the tip of your weapon against someone taking control of it.
So why don't you invert it?
Here, look where you're thrusting. Right into the gap between the shield and the sword. That's where the opening is. So even though it's a more awkward thrust, that's where the opening is. So we're going to go back. Well, let's go ahead and do it now. If you're like out here in some kind of guard position, you're fighting, and you want to make this thrust, you're probably going to draw back to the thrusting position and make your thrust all in one motion. So draw back to right couched and make your thrust. Same with left couch. You draw back to here and you make your thrust. So here we are, block, 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 draw, thrust. So, and as you draw it back, it gets that tip right into line. You make your thrust until the arm is slightly extended but not locked. You pull it back, you're back into your fight again. And it puts it right into where that slot is. All right. So, next thrusting position we'll talk about is left hip. That's down here. It's very much like this. It's just lower. When you have a shield, though, there's a big difference. This is above your shield arm. This is below your shield arm. So it really is a big difference for you as to what it can be used for and what it can't be used for and how you can get to it. You're going to have a hard time. Here's my shield. I'm going to have a hard time getting down to here to make a thrust. So you go, how would I ever get to there? Well, remember low right? Let's say I've cut from high left down into low right. I'm back here. I can swing from low right up into this thrusting position here. Make the thrust very relaxed. Look at that pendulum swing. Just like that. And once again, it's that preferred thrusting part where the actual gap is. This is really a very interesting one because even if I have a big shield, a big war shield here, if I'm left side lead, I can pendulum along the face of my body behind my own shield and have that pop up on the other side. So giant war shield here, left side lead, as I swing back into low right, and come right up into there. So it's interesting.
Now, are you going to get much of a thrust? Aren't you going to run into your shield?
No,
With your arm?
no. Strangely enough, the shield with the center grip, anyways, the shield is all out here, out in front of the hand. So you're actually on the other side of your shield.
With your kite, that's actually kind of.
Yeah, yeah. Now, once again, why not use it all the time? Well, you're locked under your shield. You are not sword blocking for a moment. There's just no way in hell you're going to sword block from there. So there is a risk. All right, so we're going for symmetry here. Another spot that you might thrust from is going to be your right hip. So right hip, that's just right here. It could be right on the hip. It could be down at the thigh. You can, if you brace it against your body a little bit, you'll get more control, just like we did with these. So if you're fighting, you draw down, you make your thrust. I'm starting to really like thrusting from here in my fighting anyways. What I'm finding, if you put your arm up like the shield, is from here, there's the shield, but you've got a decent amount of control, so as you start your motion, your tip kind of comes up right along the face of the shield, and when it clears, that's when you just shove it over and in. So it's a nice way of hiding your thrusts, whereas the higher ones, they see them. These ones tend to come up where they don't see them until the end of the thrust. I call it the Roman position because the Romans were famous for getting down here and stabbing people in the guts and drawing.
Now, the one thing, I was just, you can't really do that. You have to switch.
I think a left lead stance is best for that. Yeah, you could, if you were fighting sword and buckler, you could be a right lead stance and draw to there and make a thrust. But getting to there from the low right, probably not. If you're left lead stance, though, it's super easy.
That's where it would pull my shield out of the way.
Yeah. And you know, even though I fight right lead stance, when I fight in wars, I do a lot of left lead because you're fighting all day with a big heavy shield. And I mentioned the shield's easier to hold when you're in a left lead stance. So it's a useful war technique because you're already left leaded a lot of the time. So another thrusting position, call this the scorpion for obvious reasons, thrusting over the top. If you're directly over your head, personally, I think turning the palm up gives you a more comfortable motion and a better angle. There are variants of this, including thrusting from kind of over at the side. Against kneeling opponents, doing the thrust from more over here can actually work very nicely. It's the same motion, palm up, but you're coming in kind of from the side. They'll have the front of their helmet covered, but they won't have the back and side of their helmet covered. And you can hit down into that. Once again, you don't come out like this probably, unless you're planning to do something other than thrusting, in which case this might get them to do things that'll open them up. But you probably throw something out, draw to the air, and make your thrust all in one motion. Once again, from low right, it can lead right into that thrusting position. So here you are, you sweep back into low right, it turns right into the thrust. In fact, low right, and this comes out in the 133 manual, low right is the ideal position to come to any of your thrusting positions from. So you can sweep up to low left, you can sweep up higher to high left, you can sweep up to couched, you can come over the top to scorpion, you can sweep to low right. All those positions are just a natural motion from the low right position. You can start to see why that started to be a popular position, even though it seems like I'm putting my sword back here. It's not very handy. It's behind me. It's actually really useful for a lot of things.
But also, if you set like this, they also go, that's probably the start of something dangerous.
Yeah, maybe.
And they start going, ah!
But you realize that any cut coming from the front could end there and then move into something else. So they'll be busy celebrating that they didn't get hit by this big cut that came from the high left to the low right, not thinking about all the things that can happen from low right. All right. Covered that. All right. One last guard position that comes out of 133. And a guard position in 133 means a position from which you might throw a sword blow. Is what they call a long point. I cover it in my sword and buckler class, but it's worth bringing up here. Long point is like this. And what they point out is that at the end of any sword blow that hits your opponent, this is where you end up. If you cut through your opponent or you miss your opponent, you end up in the opposite position for like a cut, right? But if you actually hit your opponent, boom, this is where you end up. No matter where you were throwing from, what shot you were throwing, you end up roughly here. If you make a thrust, you end up there. It doesn't matter where you thrust it from, you end up there in the end, right? Yeah. So it's worth really thinking about this as a position from which you might throw sword blows. One thing that's really obvious from here is that you can draw back from here to any of the guard positions and start a sword blow from there, right? You could also draw back from here to any of the thrusting positions and make a thrust from there. Okay. So think about things you can do from here. As we talk about circles more, we'll start to realize that we can also throw circular cuts from here without ever going all the way back to one of the guard positions. And we'll get into a lot more of that in the advanced class. But anyways, long point is like the last guard that they talk about. Just in case we don't come back to it, the other thing they talk about is wards. And wards are positions that you take as a defensive response to your opponent. So the guards are kind of like wards in that sometimes you use a threat. We're here, and as a way of defending myself, I threaten you by getting up in this ward, right? And that might make you cautious about attacking. But if you look like you're going to attack me no matter what I do, I might rather be in a position where I'm more likely to be able to block. And so those kind of wards are almost always, over and over in the manual, half shield, which is like this. Comes around the late 13th century. Yep. Sword is up here, shield's in front. We've seen this a lot in the SCA and on Tir these days. It's become pretty popular. That's half shield. And so you would be in half shield as you approach your opponent. If they don't respond and you see an opportunity, you might drop back to one of the guards and throw the shot. If you pull back to one of the guards and they respond, you might switch to a different guard and throw a different shot. And they go into great, endless detail, in fact, in the 133 manual about if they do this, then you do that. If they don't respond, then you do this. And it goes on and on like that. But it mostly comes out of retreating from that half shield position to something and throwing. At the very end, they also talk about a guard which is basically like this with sword and buckler. It's just held up here. Buckler's near the head. Sword's in kind of a neutral, relaxed position. From here, you can extend into a defense, usually half shield, or you can easily transition into one of your guards and throw a shot. It's actually, medieval prejudice there. It's the one set of panels that they show a woman doing the sword work in. And personally, I think the implication is, medieval prejudices again, is they thought, women are weak. But this sword position is so good that even a woman, this is entirely effective from. And they go on and on about this position. From this position, all things can be accomplished. They save it to the very end of the manual, so you learn everything else first. And then they point out that, hey, from here, you can move to everything. So this is a really good position. Anyways, just a point of interest.
Or the ultimate.
Yeah? Okay. So things to explore with your thrusts. Move from any of the basic guard positions into any of the thrusting positions. So, start out from this guard here, hold to a thrusting position. This guard here, think about how you can get to a thrusting position from it. Shift from any thrusting position to any of the basic guard positions. So here you are here, switch back to here, draw yourself up to here. See how you can get from one spot to the other. Shift from any thrusting position to any other thrusting position. So you make the threat down here, and then you switch to here before you actually make the thrust. And play around with all the variants of that. Transition through an ending guard position from any cut into any thrusting position. So I've made my cut, and then here I am ending up in the end guard position. How can I turn that into a thrusting position and finish with a thrust? Certainly this one's the easy one. All kinds of places you can go from there. Draw back from any cut or thrust ending in long point to any thrusting position. So whether I'm going to end up here, whether I got there from a cut or I got there from a thrust, this is where I end up. Think about drawing back from there and making a thrust from pulling back into one of your thrusting positions. So once again, this is another way to get to here. We talked about how this is an awkward spot, but I can throw a shot, and once it's stopped, pull back to here, and then make a thrust from there. Okay, after thrusting, throw a circular blow from long point without withdrawing the sword. We're going to cover that more in the sword class. But you've made your thrust, you're out there in long point, draw it away and into a circular shot. We'll talk about how to do those later. So last note on thrusting accuracy. It is often difficult to develop accuracy when thrusting with a sword. Using rehearsed thrusting positions will help with this by allowing the body to become familiar with how a thrust travels from a comfortable and known position. These positions and transitions are also designed to help control and direct the mass of the sword to make it easier to bring the tip to bear. Another difficulty in thrusting accurately with a sword arises from a mental misconception. We often think to thrust at something, it's natural to think like we're poking it with our index finger, like flipping a light switch. We want to reach out and poke something, we do it like this, right? When grasping a heavy sword, this is not an analogous action. My sword is not in line with my tip. My sword is over here, right? So, to practice thrusting without a sword in your hand, it's more like trying to poke something with your thumb. Not like this, but just kind of like this. So you notice over here, it's pretty easy. But like over here, not so easy. Oh, I got to turn the hand over. Now it's easy. Didn't have to do that with my forefinger, right? But with my thumb, it helps to turn the palm up when I'm thrusting over here. What do you know? So you learn some things about how you have to position your arm and your body when you want to bring your thumb to bear on a target. This could be a way of just bringing up your thrusting accuracy for heavy fighting, is to walk around and just poke things with your thumb.
For heavy fighting.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I think that wraps up the beginning class. We're going to take an hour break for lunch, and then we'll get going on the advanced class, talk a lot more about circles and power generation and stuff.
Oh, to lunch.
Ready? In the foundation class, we learned the circular sword blow in its simplest form. We explored how important it is to keep the circular motion within a flat plane, and learned several methods of adding power to that sort of a blow. So far, we've only covered fully circular blows moving in a horizontal plane. We also introduced the use of the whirligig as an analogous motion that helps with refining our circular movement. Our next step will be to expand this motion into other planes while tying the blows together. The figure 8 pattern, with some additions, establishes sword paths and follow-throughs that connect all the sword blows together. So, let's work on that. As we mentioned, with the whirligig, you can't cheat. It's got to be a flat circle, pretty much, right? So, the figure 8s do fall into that category where you're not losing any efficiency of your sword blow. So, if you'll pick up a whirligig and get a downward figure 8 going, which looks like this. This is where people start hitting themselves in the knees or they hit their neighbors.
Catherine, you're the best.
So we know we've got a circular motion going here because you can do it with the whirligig. You can see what we're establishing here is diagonal cuts down from right to left and from left to right. You also notice that your hand, if you're making a nice broad motion, your hand is going through high left guard, high right guard, low left guard, low right guard. You're kind of moving through those zones all in one smooth motion. Okay? So we've established the motion. Let's go ahead and stop and pick up our stick and go through that same motion. So once again, we want to make sure as we cut across the front, we're cutting with the front edge of the sword. So you can start out in high right, say, and start cutting across, just like that. So yeah, we are moving through guards, but we're not stopping in those guards. We're just keeping a continuous motion moving. Now I should stop right here and mention, some people come out of my class with the idea that they're going to go to their next fight and they're going to fight the guy like this. Yeah, that doesn't really work well.
Don't do that.
But by practicing these continual motions and learning the follow-throughs, how one thing flows into another, what will happen is you'll go out and you'll be fighting your fight and you'll throw a blow and hit something, pull it through, and then throw another blow. Or you'll throw this blow and pull through and hit that blow. It ties a couple blows together. By working this pattern over and over, your body learns how to tie parts of this pattern together into 2 and 3 blow combinations. And that's the way the actual application of the fighting happens. And we will talk about it more, but when you actually hit something, there are things that change. You're not just flowing through all the time to your next shot. And we'll talk about the details of that stuff. But for now, downward figure 8, cutting with the front edge. That's what we're just trying to get a feel for. So let's go back to our weight on the string. And we're going to do an upward figure 8. So that's going to be cutting up from low right to high left and coming around and then cutting from low left up to high right. Upward figure eight is tricky for some people. So once you get it moving, take a good look at it. Make sure you're actually doing an upward figure eight and not doing a downward figure eight. Somehow there's almost always someone who gets it wrong. And I'm not sure why that is. But
My brain
How we
doesn't
going?
think that way.
yeah, it's a weird one. It helps if you think about how your hand is moving. You know, you do a small figure eight with your hand, and the string will follow. It helps if you turn your shoulders side to side so the string can pass along your side instead of hitting you in the knees. So a little turn of the shoulders, guide it with the hand. If you're having trouble still, just take it out of your hand. Just take your hand and do your hand through an upward figure eight in front of you like that. Lead with the palm. Think about it, how you go low, and then you come up towards the shoulder. You go low, and then up towards the shoulder, and then put the string back in your hand and play with it. And just like with our horizontal circles, when you're cutting from the left to the right, you push down with your left foot. When you're cutting from the right to the left, you push down with your right foot. Same kind of thing. You're generating the rotational power by pushing with your feet. You're in a downward figure eight.
Ah! I thought I was going the right. Okay, so.
You're not alone. This is difficult for some people's brains. I'm not sure what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't.
Once you get it, it goes. It's just you can't do that whole section out.
So if you're not getting it with the string, don't despair. You can go back to the back side of your toe one time. You will find it's easier to do with the sword than it was with the string if you were having trouble. But it is worth going back to the string at some point and picking up the same subtleties.
Upper left, lower left, upper right.
Remember how we talked when we were going horizontally about learning how little motions create big motions at the tip and speed it up? How you lean away, how you transfer weight on your feet. Those same lessons can be learned with the whirligig on the figure eight action. And you learn it with the whirligig and then you carry it forward to your stick, and that's where you get the power in those shots. But for now, let's go ahead and switch back to the sticks and walk through that upward figure eight with sticks. And for those who are still having trouble with the whirligig, don't worry, it's easier with the stick. So probably easiest if you start in low right guard. Remember, you're going to be cutting with the front edge. You cut from low right up towards high left. Let it come all the way around into low left. You cut from low left up into high right. And just start working that pattern with the front edge. Once again, you let your shoulders turn.
Oh, see, this is so much easier.
Isn't it? And push with your feet. Make sure that you're cutting with the front edge as you come through the front, both ways. For this one, I really feel the switch in my hands. When I'm here, when I'm cutting from my left to my right, I'm holding between the palm and the little finger. And when I'm cutting up from the right to the left, I'm holding between the thumb and the forefinger. That's what's comfortable for me anyways. There's all kinds of special trick shots in the SCA that come out of this pattern. And it's just a matter of where and when you apply this motion. Alright, so we got the basic movement. Let's see. Let's talk about adding some power. So, yeah, we'll just do it with the stick. So up in high right here, we're going to do a downward figure eight motion. Here we go. So we're cutting diagonals, down from high right to low left, from high left to low right. Now to add power to any downward moving shot, we talked about all the things about pushing with the feet and stuff like that. An alternate way to add power to a downward moving shot is to drop your weight onto the shot. The easiest way to do that is, as the shot is starting its downward motion, all you have to do is relax your knees and your whole weight will start falling downward. So if I just leave them relaxed, I'm going to fall all the way to my knees, right? Well, you don't need to quite do that. You just relax them just momentarily and let yourself fall maybe 4 inches or so, right at the point of impact. And you'll be amazed how much power you can transfer into that blow from there. There's really just tons of power available to you in any shot that has a slightly downward angle, just by relaxing the knees. And then of course after you hit the bottom of it, you let your knees pop up a little bit so you're wound up for the next drop.
There we go.
Alrighty. So upward figure eight. as you might guess, there's a similar way of generating power. These are more awkward, I'll be honest about it, but it is a way of adding a little extra power to your shot. So as you're cutting from low right to high left, you straighten your knees a little bit. That drives power upwards into the shot. Relax your knees back down as you make the return. As you're cutting from low left to high right, once again, you're going to push up with your knees a little bit.
Yep. Do you get any stress in your elbow when you do the upward?
No. It helps for me if I keep my elbow in closer to my body,
Okay.
so that I'm keeping the elbow and the upper arm almost against my torso. the
Oh
whole
yeah,
time.
that does help. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Cool.
'Cause, yeah. No, when I think I was letting my shoulder go loose. And it's, yeah.
We'll come back and talk about that too, with the shoulder and that
Okay.
junction a little bit later too. Shoulder's kind of a weak joint in the whole game.
Yeah.
Because of the way it's designed.
So any kind of upward shot, straightening your legs a little adds power to the
Because you're already
shots.
naturally flexible, right?
We'll revisit this also when we talk about jumping up in the air while throwing shots. You can start thinking about it in the back of your head. When you jump, you're straightening your knees, right? So there's a chance to drive power into an upward shot. When you start coming down, your weight's coming down on the shot. So it's just a matter of, is it an upward moving shot or a downward moving shot that you're throwing? You can decide where the power is going to come from.
Where does that?
Here now.
Whoops, I missed.
All right. So we've got these figure eight patterns. They're pretty cool. They flow. We know that it works with a whirligig. We know that they work with a stick. They're sort of predictable though. Down from the right. What's the next blow going to be? Down from the left, and then down from the right again, down from the left. Your opponent's going to get suspicious that it's pretty easy to predict what you're doing, right? So we're going to start working on some ways to mix it up without stopping or moving the sword in any kind of an awkward way. We're going to try to do it in ways that we can flow still. So one of the ways that you can make this less predictable is if we're in a downward figure eight, what if we went down from the right and kept it all along the same plane and threw down from the right again? So that's doubling through, right? And then back into the figure eight. Or down from the left again, and then back into the figure eight. That's one way we can add unpredictability. So they know they're going to be downward shots, but is it going to be continuing on one side, or is it going to move around and hit from the other side? Then they don't know that, and that's good for you. Let's go ahead and do that with the whirly kicks to get a feel for how that actually flows. So, downward figure eight. And then doubling is just like that. It's going in a circle, it's a diagonal circle. So it passes over your head and comes down from your high right, down into your low left. You can go back into your figure eight and try doubling the other way, coming down from your high left down into your low right. And as we do that with the string and the whirligig, we find that yes, it can be done fluidly. And once again, there are all kinds of lessons about how the body moves here that can be applied. You can think about dropping your weight or relaxing your knees. These are downward cuts. So, stuff to work on. Let's see. So, while we got the whirligig in our hand, let's go back to the upward figure eight. A little more awkward. So, upward figure eight. Here's a good chance to hit yourself in the back of the knee. And then doubling, so that's going to be coming up from like low right, say, to high left, over and over, cutting diagonally over and over on the same line. It's a flat plane. It's like I've got a table slanted here, and I'm moving along the surface of it. And then back into the upward figure eight, and now maybe up from low left to high right. You can see how this motion with a sword would be, say you're fighting a kneeling opponent, what if you want to hammer that rib on their sword side over and over? That's what that shot is. Repeat as necessary.
And
Right?
change it.
Yeah. And then you come around, hit over here if their shield's over here. Upward figure eights are really nice against people who are on their knees. Better target there. So, let's go back to our sword and look at that upward figure eight. So, upward figure eights with the stick. And do some doubling. Like there, you could be coming up into that rib, boom, boom, and then up into the other rib, and then switch. A common use of this that might be thought of as a trick shot is hammer the shield on this side. When they bring the shield up there, that's when you flip over and you hit them in the rib. And you might do it a couple times. Back over here. Doubling on its side would be like, it could be a repeating headshot, right? But if I throw for their head but with a little bit of upward angle, they block it, I continue around, and I repeat the same shot for the head again. It's not quite a horizontal shot, it's kind of an upward shot, which leaves me the option of figure eighting it over into the rib whenever I decide to break out of that pattern. You can see how these things start to tie together. Once again, upward figure eight shots, when it's the real thing, like let's say the first one against the shield is just to get them moving, and then I'm going to figure eight over to the rib. This is the one where I add the knees. So it's boom, boom, come over here with knees nice and bent, and then as I do this upward diagonal, that's when I drive the knees up to get extra power, because that's the one that's going to hit. So you can kind of save the knees until you need them. All right. So that gives us a little bit of unpredictability, doubling up. So let's work on adding some more unpredictability. One of the easiest ways to stop your sword's pattern and change the pattern is to hit your target. Okay? As long as your sword's in motion, you gotta have a plan as to how you're going to redirect that motion, right? Once your sword has stopped in something, now you're in long point, you could turn that circle in any direction at this point. So here I am in a downward figure eight. Boom, I stop on the target. From here, I can turn it around into an upward figure eight as easily as anything, couldn't I? Or I could be, boom, stop on the target. I could flip it around into a horizontal repeating shot if I wanted. Or boom, stopped on the target. I could go the other direction with a horizontal shot now. Once it's stopped on something, it's as easy as pie to flip it around in a new direction. Any direction, whether it be upward or downward diagonals, horizontals, verticals, whatever. Once it's stopped out here, you've got a world of possibility.
Could you easily turn it into a thrust?
Once it's stopped, we talked about that. You draw it back
draw
from
back.
any of the thrusting positions
Okay.
and thrust from there, yeah. One of the old-fashioned, most common ones is if you're throwing a horizontal shot right to left, classic onside shot, it stops. The old brick-rack is exactly that. You flipped around, you started a horizontal in the opposite direction. So that's an old shot that everybody has seen. But the truth is, you could repeat that brick-rack in any orientation. All right. Okay, so other things that can happen when you hit the target. And we just talked about reversing direction. We can do that. We can also hit and then just pull the sword back. Once it has no momentum, we can do anything we want with the thing. We can pull it back to any of the guard positions and throw from there. So stops, pull it back into this guard, throw from there. Stopped, pull it back into this guard, throw from there. Stop, pull it back into this guard, throw from there. So you can yank it back to any of the guard positions or any of the thrusting positions, as you mentioned. One thing to mention about thrusting while we're on thrusting is if you make a thrust and it gets stopped, so go ahead and lift your sword like the St. George block. Yeah. So I thrust, and he's got it blocked. Once I'm here, I can leave it in place, and this comes right out of the medieval manual. They call it winding, which is you change your orientation to the blade and then rethrust. So if you block over on that side, so let's say I thrust, nothing, change my angle, and then rethrust. So that's called winding in the medieval manuals. You see it a lot with two-handed swords, especially. They come in with the basic thrust. When it gets blocked, they change their angle and continue the thrust. Yeah, it has its uses. Not as easy as it sounds like, but still very effective. Okay. Right. This is sort of a dangerous drill. I'll demonstrate it with someone, and then in your guys' own time and with insurance, you can practice it. But this has to do with how to get used to throwing a circular blow from long point. If you'll hold on to the weight, okay, and then put your arm all the way straight, okay, and hang on to it good and tight. Lean back from me a little bit. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to yank this out of your hand, make it so I can yank it out. There we go. And you're going to go back. As soon as I yank, you're going to step back so I don't hit. Ready? Okay. So that action, that sense of pulling it back and starting the circle is exactly what happens when you hit something in long point and then you're throwing a circle from there. It gives you a real feel for how the first thing you do is you pull back against the weight of the weapon a little bit to get it in motion, and then you start that little circle with your hand, which turns into a big circle for the sword. Very useful. I mean, like I said, every time you hit something, you're in long point, and from there, pull and throw to any circular action. Can't possibly emphasize that enough. All right, so on to more unpredictability. Okay, another natural way to reverse a figure eight action is to stop in a guard. So we were talking about how, say with the downward figure eight, we're going from high right to low left, and then it just kind of coasts up into high left and cuts from high left down into low right. So we're moving through guards, but we're doing it in a continuous action. Well, just like when we began and we throw, let's say, high right to low left, and we just stop there, we can do that at any point in our figure eight too. So we've got a figure eight going, and I can just let it wind up and stop down here in low left. And once I'm in low left, I could either throw any of the simple shots we've learned, or I could reverse and start into an upward figure eight from there. So one of the ways you can easily go from, let's say, a downward figure eight to an upward figure eight is just to stop in one of the low guards and then reverse it and get going in the other direction. And if you were in an upward figure eight, you can stop in one of the high guards and reverse into a downward motion. It's a nice simple way to change the direction up or down of your diagonal pattern. It's a little slower than some of the other methods, but it's very reliable. It has the advantage of either being able to immediately reverse your direction or put a pause in your motion where you simply stop there. And if I'm going downward figure eight, say, and I get to here and I stop, I could reverse, or I could wait a moment and then continue the same downward figure eight. So it's a way of putting a pause in. Boom, 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 boom. And for those of you who are experienced fighters, you know that a pause can be devastating at times for an opponent, where they catch the rhythm and then they go block and then they come back down. Oh, the shot's still coming. It's coming just a moment later than they thought it was, and that can be quite effective. All right. Okay, so this is one that I like symmetry, that if you can do something going upwards, I like it to work going downwards. If you can do something downwards, I like it to work going up, right, left. This is one that is not symmetrical. It just happens to work one way, but it doesn't really work the other way, for me anyways. So if you're in an upward figure eight motion, when you're at the top arc up here, you can reverse to a downward motion simply by relaxing your knees, dropping your weight, and pulling it back down into the downward motion. You have so much power to spare when you drop your knees like that, that you really can, very effectively, without any strain, reverse from upwards to downwards at the top. So get a feel for that. When you're here, you're up, you get to there, just reverse and pull back down, and it reverses right down. This can be nice, like if you throw upwards against someone's shield, let's say they're on their knees, they block the head, you throw upwards like this, you get to the top, and you just reverse and come right back down along the same line. It's almost like cutting from low right to high left, and then back down from high left to low right, and you could do that, but you don't actually have to get all the way back to the guard. It's effective enough that you can actually have your hand floating out here still and reverse it and drop it back in. Yeah, it's nice and comfortable going from up to down. I've tried it going from down to up. It's not as comfortable. So I've kind of given up on that one as being an easy motion. But going up to down, very comfortable. All right, so there's one last transition to go from upwards to downwards or downwards to upwards. And this one's kind of weird. It's fast, but it's a little complicated. What ends up happening is if you're going downward figure eight, say, and you want to switch to an upward figure eight, you can't just switch unless you like stop in the back smoothly. But what you can do is you can cheat the motion just a little bit, and then a little bit more, and it'll switch it. So if you are in a downward figure eight here, and my next blow from the right is going to be, or from the left is going to be a horizontal blow, then my next blow from the left can be an upward blow. So what you end up doing is 3 blows in a row from the same side, but you go, say, upwards, horizontal, and then downwards, or upwards, horizontal, and then downwards, or it can go the other way. So let's see what that looks like. So here we go. Upwards, and then upwards, horizontal, and then downwards. So it's 3 blows on the same side at 3 different angles. Or on the other side, upwards, horizontal, and downwards. Or we could start with the downward figure 8. So downwards, it's going to be downwards, horizontal, upwards. Or we could be going from the other side, downwards, horizontal, upwards. You can see how that can be useful against an opponent as a combination, because you could be working top of the shield, middle of the shield, under the shield. Three shots on one side of the blow, all smoothly rotating together. And then after this, you're in a figure 8 pattern. You can throw any of the shots you know from the figure 8 pattern to follow out of that. What you're starting to see here is by tying things into these figure 8s and then looking at the different transitions of the figure 8s, that you can create very complex combination shots, 4 or 5 blow combination shots, without really pre-planning them or thinking of them. One thing just flows into the next. And that's the idea behind training the fluid figure 8s. It's not that you're going to be throwing figure 8s for 15 minutes during your fight, but it allows you to flow from one blow to the next and to do all kinds of combinations, which to your mind are not separate complicated blows. They're just an extension of the figure 8 motion. All right. Okay, so something that we didn't actually drill, because I wanted you to learn how to flow first, before we break it up into its little bits. Let's talk about breaking up the figure 8 motion now into the terms of our first class, the basics of sword blows. So if I'm in high right, I can cut to low left, and then I can lift to high right, and I can cut from high right high left to low right. And then here I am in low right, I can lift to high right, and I can cut to low left. Well, what do I got here? I've got a figure 8, right? This is the figure 8 that I've got control on, and I can pause at any time, or I can reverse at any time. Different timing, same motions. It's the same thing as doing this. It's just a different feel, a different timing, a different speed. So being aware of both, being comfortable with both ways of looking at it, is useful to your fighting. It gives you more control over your timing and your weapon. And those transitions can be either upward or downwards. All right. Okay, so at this point, you have a rudimentary core of the circular style in its complete form. This can be refined and new aspects of it can be explored. But for now, we need to take some time. We're not going to practice it. I'm going to leave that to you. We've got too much to cover. But what we're going to do next, we're going to try to get a more complete understanding of circles. Circular blows are made up of circles of the hand, the wrist, the elbow, the shoulder, and the torso. Don't worry, this chart is in the class materials. You can look it up online. Circles earlier on the list have greater speed and versatility, but less power and less acceleration, thereby requiring greater strength and more circular travel time to be effective. Circles later on the list, i.e. like the shoulder and the torso, have the opposite characteristics. The weaker circles usually must travel for more of the circle to generate sufficient power. Stronger circles can travel less far around and still hit hard enough. So let me give examples of what I'm talking about here. So circle of the hand. This is circle of the hand. All I'm doing is loosening and tightening my hand. It's not a full circle, you notice, but it is at least a half a circle. It's about 180 degrees. That's pretty good. Circle of the hand is very quick. Your hand can clench and unclench really fast. It's usually not powerful enough to kill your opponent all by itself, though. But it does add a significant amount of power and speed to your shot. And it's very versatile. You can put your hand way over here, you can put your hand way over here. You can launch that circle from all kinds of places. It doesn't have to be in one ideal spot. So versatile, fast, but a little too weak all by itself. Circle of the wrist. Not much going on with the elbow there, but mostly in the wrist. I'm probably adding a little bit of hand to it, honestly. but it comes out as a full circle. Circle of the wrist is fast, not as fast as the hand. It's weak, but not as weak as the hand. And in fact, probably with a full circle, circle of the wrist alone is enough to generate power on your shot, as long as you're adding the pressure of the feet, the little turn of the body, the leaning, the pulling away from the weight of the sword, all those little things added together. If you're going up or down, adding the straightening of the knees or the dropping of the knees, if all those little things are in place, circle of the wrist alone has enough power. For an average guy, it takes a full circle though. So let's say I am here and I try to throw with just the wrist. Probably not enough power. That's a half a circle. But let's say I come out in long point, I can flip and throw a full circle, and if everything else is working, I can probably get enough power on that with just the wrist. Nice thing about that is, for instance, if I'm in here and I've thrown a wrap, I can flip that same wrap without ever retreating my hand significantly back from behind the shield. Everything has to be just right. You have to have flat arcs, no coning. But if everything is right, a full circle can be enough for just the wrist to hit. Circle of the elbow, that's this sort of thing. Look, I can throw the same angle over here, letting it rotate at the elbow. The elbow is stronger. This kind of a shot, in its beginning, is a circle of the elbow shot mostly. It's using the muscles of the tricep to drive the shot. Circle of the elbow is a sort of a medium speed shot, medium power shot. Often a half circle is enough for circle of the elbow. So if everything else is in place, if I start here, I can probably kill with circle of the elbow, and that's only a half circle motion of the sword. There may be a follow through after it, of course, but half circle may be enough lead to kill with circle of the elbow. Circle of the shoulder is a big powerful muscle. That's these kind of motions. When we're doing the really big relaxed figure eight, that's usually circle of the shoulder. Circle of the shoulder is powerful. It's slow and predictable. But a circle of the shoulder, you may be able to power a shot in just a quarter turn. So from like here to the target, if you're pulling with the big shoulder muscles. And you see large guys use this and you think, oh, they're just a chopper. Well, what they're really doing is they're throwing a quarter of a circle. They may be very aware that if they miss or if they power through, that they can pull it through into another blow. It's just the beginning of the circle. But that big powerful shoulder muscle, a shorter action, can drop the weight into it. And lastly, there's circle of the torso. Circle of the torso is this, of course, just the turning of the torso. That can be driven by the feet, but it's the body turning. Circle of the torso is tremendously powerful, but it's not, all by itself, it's not quite fast enough to drive the necessary speed to cut through armor. So it's like, I can line up and push against somebody in chainmail, push as hard as I can, and it's still not going to cut the chainmail. There just wasn't the hard impact. There's plenty of force there, it's just all too slow. And that tends to be the problem with circle of the body. So, if you just hold it tight like this, turn with your body, lots of power, but not enough speed to make the kill. So what you end up doing is adding the circle of the body to your other circles to support them. Now we're starting to get into things that sound familiar, like the Bellatrix snap. And we'll break that down a little bit. So the circle of the body, of the torso, usually supports other motions. We'll come back to this, but interestingly, combining the circle of the body with the circle of the hand can often create a perfectly sufficient hard blow, because the hand's got the speed that the body's missing, and the body's got the power that the hand is missing. And when you put those two things together, you got everything you need. All right. Let's break some things down. Okay, so how circles are really combined. In reality, most blows involve a little of all these circles to greater or lesser degrees. We can examine how they support each other, sometimes one giving away to another in a linked chain. By adding circles together, especially using the circle of the torso to support other circles, a great deal of power can be added to blows. A blow can start with the circle of the torso, use a bit of the circle of the hand, move to circle of the shoulder or elbow, and end with a return or new blow coming out of the circle of the wrist. So let's demonstrate this. So let's say I'm starting out here. I start with circle of the body. Here's sort of classic Bellatrix snap kind of stuff. The hips turn, and that drags the rest of the body along in a circular action, right? At that point, I add circle of the shoulder. There it is, the shoulder motion there. So body, here comes the shoulder. Then circle of the elbow, drags out, and there's the classic point of impact, right? So far, I've involved the body, the shoulder, and the elbow. At the point of impact, though, if I miss, I can take that circular motion and I can continue it just in the wrist. So everything's involved to here, but it can continue from there. So one circle can give way to another circle. You go to here, everything stops. Ugh! And if I hung onto the sword hard, that would be bad for me, right? But if I allow it to continue at the hand, everything stops except for the sword and the hand on the wrist, allowing it to keep moving once it gets there. Your electronics are talking to you.
Always a bad sign.
So that's an interesting thing for people to know. The more powerful fighters that can get away with the choppy shots is to know that at the end of the chop, if they miss, they can stop the hand and lock everything in place with the rest of the body, but allow the sword to continue moving. So that's this. It's all stopped, except I let the wrist keep going, and so the sword can recover. And it's fighting the sword that hurts your joints. You can stop your body, okay. If you can't do that, you've got medical problems. But when you add the weight of the sword and all that momentum, that's when you start damaging your joints. But if you let the sword keep moving, you're okay. So you're transferring from one circle to another. Not to mention there are opportunities to hit your opponent there. Let's see. By varying which circles, wrist, elbow, etc. are used, how flat or squeezed your angle is, and your placement of the center of the circle, all variety of blows can be understood in terms of the circular pattern, taking advantage of being connected to other blows by way of follow-throughs and returns. Once you start using everything in terms of it being thought of as a circle, now you can use the figure eight to carry one kind of blow to the next kind of blow without a stop in between. You've got returns for things. You hit something, you've got to return back through the figure eight pattern. Let's see. All right, so there's a special little thing I've been working on the last couple months that I'd like to talk about now that we've talked about the natures of circles. The shoulder is kind of a weak point. The body is such a powerful circle that frequently, ideally what would happen is the body would circle and then the shoulder would engage and you'd add a little circle to the shoulder. But sometimes the shoulder is weaker than the body's strength, and so what happens is the body turns, like say if my shoulder's just relaxed here, my body drives and the shoulder actually can't keep up and it lags behind. And that just wrecks the shot because you lose the connection of the body turn to the shot. You rotated your body, but it never made it to your hand where the sword is at because it was lost in the shoulder dragging behind. I see this a lot. I was watching some film footage of beginning fighters trying to figure out why so-and-so, it looked like they were moving basically okay, but all their shots were coming out really weak and awkward, and this other guy, same kind of shots, but they were coming out snappy and crisp. I was looking for the difference. And here's the difference that I found. Even if they're fighting here with like the elbow up, high guard kind of thing, when they throw a snap, the elbow moves in tight to the center line before the body makes its turn to throw the snap. That's the way that works good. So this kind of a snapping shot, even though a new fighter is paying attention to the sword and they see the snapping motion and then they've been told turn the hips first, what the inexperienced fighter tends to do is they turn the hips and the shoulder's loose and it goes lag, the body turns, and then they try to power the sword in with just the arm. They've completely lost the body from the motion. Whereas if the elbow makes it to here before the body turns, it translates immediately into the sword and actually puts the body into the sword shot. So same motions out of order is actually destructive to your blow power. So when you watch in slow motion, you see the experienced fighters and they go, whereas here's the inexperienced fighter. The body turns first, the shoulders gets all saggy before it goes.
So when you start in like high right, just like the standard Bellatrix snap, right? He says, if I remember correctly, create tension across this muscle. Right?
Exactly. And that's how he is overcoming the mushiness of the shoulder.
Right.
Is the correct Bellatrix snap, he has you take the sword, ride it all the way back here until it can't go any farther,
Right.
and then do this. And what that means is the shoulder joint is fully stretched, which means when the body moves, the shoulder will come along with it no matter what, because it simply can't lag behind because it's already stretched to its max. And so it immediately translates to the hand. That is one way of getting the force of the body turn immediately to the hand. If you're anything other than fully stretched here, though, you've got room for this loss. Now, there is another way to deal with this. Hold your hand out in front of you, palm up, and then retreat your hand like this. You'll feel your back of your upper arm press up against your ribs. Actually, it even helps if when you're here, rotate your elbow in just a little bit, and then pull your hand back until it stops being comfortable. It's up against your body. Now turn the hand back to here. That's with your hand palm up. That's where your sword blow. Feel this connection here. Now when you throw a blow, notice that when your body turns, your hand moves immediately. There's no mushiness. The shoulder is not involved in this motion. There is the body, and there's the hand and wrist. And there is no arm, elbow, or shoulder especially in this motion. It's all body, hand, and wrist. A great deal of power can come out of that, interestingly enough, and very easily. Here, here, here. And it's really mostly coming out of the turn of the body and a little snap, turn of the wrist, snap of the hand. So circle the hand, circle the wrist, circle the body being added together. The nice thing is that's so effective, even from your knees, lots of power. Whereas if you're all mushy out here, it's much harder to get your power. Here and here you got fast snaps even from your knees. So eliminating the mushiness of the shoulder can definitely be useful. The reason this gets missed by new fighters, is and you notice it in slow motion, is one, they're watching the sword, and the sword is doing this. So they don't notice what the elbow's doing. And two, it happens very fast. You know, there's only a couple frames between here and here on those films. It's like boom, and then you see the big sword blow. That tuck of the elbow is super quick, and it happens right at the very beginning of the sword blow. All right. Okay, so let's talk about, I got to teach a special case here. I've taught that there has to be a follow-through for every blow. I started doing this because I hurt my elbows long ago when I used to fight with the old high guard snap and didn't have something to do if I missed. I don't necessarily recommend anyone throw a high guard snap this way because it's inherently dangerous to your elbow. But there is a follow-through. If you decide you want to throw it, there are two options for follow-through that can be used. So the snap I'm talking about, if you put your sword up there you go, like that. So he's blocked his head, right? And I want to hit him in the head, so I'm going to throw this high guard snap here like this. It's a really awkward angle to throw a shot. I can do it, but if I miss, where's that thing going to go, right? That's the problem. So two solutions for it. One is, think of it as an upward figure eight. So there's the pattern, upward figure eight, rotating around the hand. And you can see that pretty much hits the same spot. So go ahead and put that there. There's the hit, upward figure eight. Okay, it doesn't hit quite as sweet an angle. So honestly, if you think ahead and you think upward figure eight, there'll be that temptation to go a little steeper to actually make the hit than you really can get away with as for a figure eight. And once again, you find yourself locked up at the end of the blow, especially if you miss. So there is still an answer for that even if you push too far, which is if you can, the problem you have is that your arm just doesn't bend that way. That's the problem you're running into. You need to reorient the orientation of your arm to your sword, the relationship of your arm to your sword, to be able to allow that sword to continue the motion it's making. The place you need to be is here, because now the sword can continue that direction of travel. See, there's the direction of travel. The sword needs to go like this, but my arm doesn't bend that way. I need to get my arm to here so that it can go that way. And you can actually do that, believe it or not. If you focus on getting your elbow above your head as quickly as you can, everything will fall back into place. So to demonstrate that, go ahead and actually grab my sword there. Lower it down a little more. We'll get the really awkward angle, okay? So from here, if he holds onto that sword, that's kind of a simulation of all that speed and momentum that's trying to make my sword continue going and not want to go where I want it to go. What you do, loosen the hand, just enough so you can retain the sword, lift the elbow. Whoop, I didn't get it.
So I wasn't trying to
It's
hold
all
you.
right. No, no worries. Lift the elbow, rotating the sword in its axis, but not changing its angle significantly, and then pull back this way. So here we go in motion. Go ahead and catch it. Also notice what the shoulders are doing. There's the hit, there's rotation, my shoulders are rotating back, and then pulling back. So that can be an answer to the high guard snap. I don't know if I want to spend more time on that. If anyone starts using a high guard snap and they want to know how to recover from it, come work with me and I'll work with you on that. But that is a way of recovering. No matter how badly you've overcommitted to really snapping over at that bad angle, if you focus on pulling, getting the elbow up over your head, and pulling the shoulders back, you can recover it without busting your elbow up. All right. So, applying the figure eight to hitting things. When your sword hits things, like your opponent for instance, it has an effect on the natural trajectory of your cut. Below is a list of ways this effect can be integrated into your full circle theory. These approaches are broken into two categories. First category, blows that hit and pull through the target. So, if you make a penetrating blow with a follow through, you hit the target, it did stop on the target, but you loosen the hand, you continue to pull it on through the same angle, and you hit again at the same angle. Here it is, downward, diagonal, hit, it stopped on the target, I just loosen my hand, I continue to pull it on through, and I hammer that same angle again. So that is one of your options. It can be done from each angle of attack, including the near vertical. A skipping shot can be used to make the first shot a feint and the second shot faster and more solid. So, good, stops, I loosen, I throw, that has one timing. What if I throw a little shallow so it just skips off their shield? They think they blocked it, but I've just tipped their shield. I can be there with the second shot faster than I could have been if I went deeper on the first shot. So it's a variation. The other option is to hit, relax and pull through, but actually let it come to an end at the word. So this is like cutting high right to low left, except for, ooh, I hit something, I relax, I pull it on through to low left. Now I'm in low left. I've got options. I could reverse cut from low left, I could lift up to high left and cut down from there. Anything I could do from just starting here in low left, I've got as an option. And that happens in all the other directions. So, it stops, you pull it through to low right. I could cut up from low right, I could lift to high right, cut down, I could swing all the way around over to high left. I have all kinds of options at that point. So that's one of the ways you can do things. Hits in the target, you pull it on through. So the second variation are blows that stop in the target. In reality, a blow that halts all blade movement and stops in the target at long point can be spun in any direction, resulting in a circular blow in any angle of attack. A couple of the most common blows of the sort are listed. The Rick Rack is an example of this. We already covered it. It hits, it stops, you reverse it, you go absolutely opposite of it. Mostly rotation of the wrist. That could happen at any angle. Upward figure eight kind of shot, stops in the target, Rick Rack it around in the opposite direction. Could be over here, coming up into the rib, Rick Rack it around, hit the top of the head. All kinds of options.
Now, from the one that you did before, where we're doing, where you're transferring it, where you're like pausing and then coming straight through with the second blow, does that help with rhino heights? I'm just curious of that second blow being that much.
It could have more authority. Sometimes hitting someone repeatedly in the same spot will help them notice it.
Yeah.
And sometimes people just miss shots.
Yeah, and the reality is people are more likely to miss a body shot than a head shot.
Yep.
So if they haven't read your body shot, switch up and hit them in the head if you can, because they're more likely to be able to read a head shot. But this is actually a fine time to talk a little bit about gauging. I was listening to a radio program on science stuff, and they were talking about stress and stress responses. Your body does all kinds of things when you're under stress, including it stops growing, for one thing. It stops all those functions that it doesn't need, and it worries about the saber-toothed tiger that's coming after you. And it does a bunch of things to best place you to survive that. One of the things it does is it gets rid of your pain response.
Right.
So when you're feeling a lot of stress, your sensation of how much something hurts changes. The example they gave was a guy who got knocked out of a boat, and the boat backed over him, and the propellers ripped his legs off. Now that probably hurt a lot. He didn't notice it. He felt a tug is what he felt, and he knew he was in trouble, and he screamed for them to pull him up out of the boat, and then he told them how to put a tourniquet on his legs And that's what saved his life. He was the calm one, and he was not in pain yet because his body had shut down his pain sensors, which is a good thing to do evolutionarily. But when we're fighting, you know, we all think, oh, I know how to gauge. You know, I've taken a shot or whatever. I know what a good hard hit to the leg feels like and stuff. The more stressed we're feeling, the more we're afraid of our opponent, or the more we really want to win that tournament, or whatever is a stressor for us, the less things are going to hurt. So, you know, sometimes I hear people, well, I'm not wearing any body armor. I barely felt it. It's like, yeah, well, that's because you're wired up. I know darn well how that shot hit, you know.
Well,
and then it goes both ways. What's that?
You can hit people too hard.
Yeah. Oh, that's true, too.
And their body will shut down.
What probably happens there is severe stress all of a sudden, and the body goes into high stress mode.
Their
Shuts
brain,
down all the
their
pain
brain, their
sensors.
brain says, I'm not wearing armor. Wait!
Yeah.
You stave in
Absolutely.
someone's leg armor, and they'll say no.
Yeah.
I've seen the dents 2 inches into the leg, and they're like,
So,
nah.
you know, it's
Oh,
an
God.
imperfect world. There's really nothing we can do about that. As far as our own engaging, we can try to be aware that, hey, I'm feeling the stress. You know, I got to pay some attention, not to just how it felt to me this time, but what did it look like? Did I block it? You know, sometimes it's not going to feel the same to you. And, of course, to be kind to our opponents and realize, hey, they're under stress. They just didn't feel that. I'll hit them somewhere else a couple times, and they'll notice that, you know.
Generally, if you can hit someone once, you probably hit them more than once.
A very nice thing that Duke Uther's house has, they have this whole treatise on how they relate to fighting and stuff. And the very first rule is, to win a fight in the SCA, you must convince your opponent that they have been defeated.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you hit them, doesn't matter how many times you hit them, doesn't matter where you hit them, whatever it takes to convince them that they've been defeated. That
Right.
you're the winner and they're the loser. That's really what it comes down to. And it may mean hitting them a lot. It might mean hitting them in a certain spot. It might mean just scaring them a lot. I don't know. But one way or another, they get the sense that, hey, I've lost this fight, you've won this fight, and you move on to the next round. So it gets rid of all the whiny, hey, but that's not fair. It is what it is. All right.
I like that. Hey, that's not fair.
So blows that stop on the target. Once it's stopped, you can return that in a teardrop. A teardrop is a piece of the figure eight. Watch this figure eight action. See back here? Teardrop shape, returns, teardrop shape, return. Okay, so if it stops, I can return a teardrop on the same side. It's part of the figure eight. It's only one half of the figure eight over here. Same thing, right? Now this looks pretty familiar to people who know the Bellatrix stuff.
Yes.
They do the downward teardrop all the time for the return. Also though, your upward figure eight, the back of that is a teardrop. So hit, I can upward teardrop.
So it's almost
For
a rising
returns, too.
snap if you go the other.
So that's a second way of
Yeah.
returning from a stop shot. I like this one when everything's locked up in the high line. They've got their shield up here, and I'm all up here, and I've hit them here. I can't get my sword down. Their shield's in the way. I can do a return in the high line like that. Same with the other side. Okay, one last little thing. Don't know how it fits here. Oh yeah, if it stops in the shot. Okay. Reverse behind the head pendulum. This looks like this. Actually, if you want, I can have you hold this. So I've thrown an offside shot that hits the sword and stops. I can repeat that with a behind the back pendulum, like that. Okay, so let's talk about what's going on there. It is a horizontal shot, and once it's stopped, you return it back horizontally while relaxing the hand. Once it gets behind your head, you're letting the sword swing naturally. It gets to here, you relax the hand, and the sword's going to swing there. And you encourage it a little bit with a little turn of the body, because where you want it to end up is right here. Because this is 3/4 of a turn horizontally away from that blow again. So it bounces back to here, you let it pendulum, now we're 3/4 away from the circle, there's a shot again. Comes back to here, let it fall,
Oh, okay.
and it becomes a nice, easily repeatable kind of thing. Let's give the camera a view of that. Okay. Here it is. And slow down. Here we go. So that's very handy for repeating offside shots. Offside shots can sometimes be difficult to get power on. So having a fluid way of bringing those back up can be useful. I think I learned that one from George Lancaster, if I remember right. Okay, so further refining shots. That first sword blow, when your sword is still and you're putting it into motion, Yes, I've been lying to you this whole time. Everything I've taught you about circular sword blows is absolutely true for your second blow and your third blow and your fourth blow. All those blows that happen once your sword is already in motion. The very first blow, when your sword is sitting still and you're putting your sword into motion, is different. It's different in a little way, but we need to be aware of it and use that to our advantage instead of it distracting us with the shot. So, when something is still and you put something into motion, it's going to try to stay still, and you're going to have to kind of drag it along. So, when I'm swinging this thing, it stays out there centrifugal force. Notice I'm holding it with my thumb and my forefinger. It's out there nice and fine out on the end of the circle. But when it's just sitting here still, if I rotate my body, look what happens. You see what happened there? The sword wants to stay where it is. My body is going, but the sword is going to stay behind. And eventually, once my body's going faster, the sword rides out and starts traveling on the circle. It's going to make me dizzy probably. Here we go. Okay, now it's out there, right? But in the beginning, there's that. And that is different. Okay, so we've got to deal with that. So when you're still, if you're out here, when you start moving, it's going to want to lag behind. There are two things. Usually the circle of the hand can be used to deal with that. Circle of the hand. So here I am. My sword's pointing back. If I start to turn, the sword's going to want to drag behind. The tip's not going to come out. What if I do the circle of the hand early on? I flex the hand. That kicks the tip out, gets it in motion. So from here on, as I turn the body, the tip is pointing straight out away from my body instead of dragging behind my body. Right? So I don't want it doing this. I can't get to my opponent. I want it out here doing this. So I flex the hand early, and that gets the tip into motion out on the end of the circle as my body turns. That's one way of dealing with it. Easier for a target again. You'll hold this here. Actually, hold it there.
Okay.
So here's what happens with this. Flex the hand, it gets out there on the end of the circle, I can throw my shot, right? So that's okay. It's an easy way to move. I like it because it's easy to put into combos and stuff. There is another approach which involves accentuating that drag. Remember this drag here where the tip's not coming out? You can leave the tip behind, turn the body, leave the tip dragging behind, and then snap it out at the end. So you've already turned your body, but you have not let that tip go out on the end of the circle yet. And only when you've passed the line of something that's blocking you, do you flex the hand and allow the tip to actually ride out onto the end of the circle. That's kind of a Thorin trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about the philosophy attack.
Yeah. So there's two different approaches. They both have their time and their place. I like the first approach because of its flow and its ability to flow from one blow to another. But I like the second approach because you can kind of insert your sword behind their defense at really bizarre times. So it certainly has its advantages. Okay, so we talked about how one of the most versatile places you can be is out here in Long Point, because from here you can throw a circle in any direction, right? And one of the ways to get to Long Point, there's a couple ways to get there. One is throwing a real blow, where you've committed your body, but you've hit and you've stopped. Or a thrust gets you out there. You can also throw a weak setup shot. Boom, not really committing much, just throw it maybe with a circle of the hand, just to get your sword out there. What you can't do is this, usually. You can't come up to your opponent and go. Yeah, you can't just set it out there. If they know you, they're going to get really suspicious you're setting them up for something. So you need an excuse for your tip to be out there. But that excuse can either be a real blow, or it could be a weak setup blow that they think is a real blow, but it's just setting you up. You can also do a real blow that lingers on the target. So if they're used to you going, yeah, throwing the shot and then throwing your next shot, what if you go, yeah, and you just kind of leave it there for a moment, a pause, and you get a feel for where they're open, and then you throw your blow. So that's another way of being out there in Long Point. Another way to get to Long Point is changing guards. If you're always absolutely locked in your guard, this isn't going to work. But if you shift around when you're fighting and you move through different positions, hey, I'm in Long Point. Hey, I'm in Long Point. You know, you can get yourself into Long Point in the process of moving from point A to point B, and they may not realize that you've just put them into danger. False thrusts. When you really commit to a thrust, that's one thing, and that's okay. You can commit to a thrust and and throw from there. But you can also do false thrusts where you've left your body energy relaxed so you can throw your next blow sooner. It gives you faster timing. If you are going to do a false thrust, you can know ahead of time what your follow-up blow is going to be. So let's say I want to hit him right there. And my ideal way of getting there is this circle from here to here. That gives me a nice long, nearly a full circle. I can throw that with my wrist. But I need to get to here somehow. I can't come up to him and go, oh, look at that target. Oh, yeah, here we go. You get the hang of that, right? And if I normally thrust for him up there, I probably would have thrusted like this from this position, or like this, right? And that's good for my thrust. But what I really want to throw is that. So what if I throw my thrust like this? Not a good thrusting position, really. If I hit, it might not even stick right. But all I'm really trying to do is get in long point with my edge in line for the blow I want to throw. So you're planning ahead. You're going, I want to throw this blow. And so you're setting yourself up for that blow by doing a false thrust that puts your blade in the line you want for the blow you're going to throw. All right. Feeling out taps is another way of getting out there, especially with two sword and shield fighters. You can kind of just sort of whap their shield like that. Every time your sword's out there on their shield, you're in long point. All right. Even though these long point shots look like they're all circle of the wrist, you'll find you can add a lot of circle of the body and circle of the elbow and stuff to those shots as well. And the more you involve, the harder the shot will be. So there's lots to explore with figure eights. I've tried to be fairly comprehensive in the figure eight department, but you may still find stuff that hasn't been included here. You want to get familiar with where your sword is all along the figure eight. As we talk about blocking later, we're going to start using some of the backfield of the figure eight as a blocking position. Another useful trick to bring up at this point is tracing blows backwards from the target to find new trick shots. So now that we understand that shots can travel on circular trajectories, we can think about how to backtrack that trajectory from where the opening is. So if you'll hold your sword up in a blocking position, let's say you hold your sword there, and let's say she's got her shield here. This is all covered, right? The spot that I want to hit is right there, say, okay? That's going to be a hard spot to get to. So I can start out thinking, boy, every time I fight her, that's the only thing I see I can hit. How can I hit that? And what I can do is have someone stand in that position, put my sword there, and then backtrack a flat circle to a beginning point. Okay? So I see that's the beginning point I need, so if I want to hit that spot, that's how I'm going to throw it. And I discovered that by going there and reversing my flat circle from the spot where I can hit. And I see where that is, and I can actually put myself to that spot and throw that blow now, because I know what it's going to do. Any number of shots are like that. You can say, okay, there's the spot. It's awkward, but how do I get there? Oh, there it is. Okay, so boom, there's the shot I want. Walk it backwards.
I noticed this a lot.
Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, this is a neat little trick. It's another way of approaching circular shots. Circle of the wrist. If I'm here, and I throw a circle of the wrist like this, where the wrist is the center of the circle, and the sword is trying to make it all the way around the wrist, I'm having to fight the entire weight of the weapon. The good part about that is when it hits, it's going to hit with the entire mass of the weapon. And it's got a nice long travel circle, so it's going to have time to build up some speed. The bad part is I'm having to fight against the entire mass of the weapon to get it going. If I'm too weak to get it up to 100% speed by the time it hits, I'm not going to be hitting with my maximum power, even though it's a heavy weapon and it's got all the tip out on the end of it. I can change the physics a little bit, essentially making the weapon lighter, but allowing myself to have more leverage against it so I can move it faster. And sometimes that can be to my benefit. And the way I do that is, okay, there's the center balance point of the sword, right? If I'm here, if instead of making it move all the way around my hand, I swap around the center point of the sword, if I completely swap around the center, I completely negate the weight of the sword. That's not good because there's almost no weight at all hitting my opponent at that point. But I can go halfway, and instead of rotating it around here, I can rotate it around here. So I'm swapping my hand around, not quite the center point, but a little farther in. which means I'm still feeling some of the mass of the blade that I'm having to swing around, but not all of the mass of the blade. So it's a way of lightening the blade and allowing myself to get more leverage against it. And so it'll come in faster. It's like hitting faster with a lighter blade is what it's like. So that's an interesting trick. One very interesting application of that, same principle, is turning a thrust into a cut. So here's a thrusting action, right, coming over the top, and here's a cut to the leg coming circularly down this way. Watch this. So here it comes. Here's the center of balance, right? Here it comes with a thrust. The center of the balance stops, but the hand is still moving forward, and there's the cut. So watch the center point. Watch my finger here. Here it goes. It stops. Okay. Now watch the same motion. Watch the hand. The hand never stopped. The center point stopped of the sword, but the hand did not stop. So you're pivoting around that center point, and your body and your hand motion do not stop. Interesting trick to play around with. I'm sure there's other applications of that principle, but it's fun.
I'm trying not to tear up your arch.
My wrist won't move that much. I'm not kidding. My wrist tightens up right there.
You probably need to loosen the hand. Let
Yeah.
the hand do it instead of the wrist.
Yeah, probably.
Not to get too far off topic though. On medieval fighting with broadswords or heavy swords, like two hands and a hand and a half, did they actually really use powerful cuts to get through the armor, or did they mainly use thrusting?
Depended on the period. They certainly used thrusting a lot more than you might think, especially when there was armor involved. And a lot of those two-handed and hand-and-a-half swords are much lighter and balanced closer to the hand than you expect, and which makes them kind of poor for chopping, actually, but makes them quite effective for grabbing and poking. They often would grab the blade, actually, give them better control over the point.
Yeah, I was about to say they had that, what is it called?
There's a really good Netflix video on grid sword fighting and two-handed grid sword fighting. I think it's by the sword or through the sword.
There is one called, Reclaiming the Sword? Is that the one?
Reclaiming the sword.
Yeah.
And so they have like stuff over up here. And like, this is all just a fakey bit.
Yeah.
So they swing down to miss. They're hoping to get the quellion on you. They get the quellion to catch on your guard, and then they're going to use the pommel to hit your chin.
Yeah, we'll do all kinds of interesting stuff. A lot of it turns into grappling, too.
Yeah, it's not a lot of chop.
Huh. Take grapple check.
It's a lot of breaky.
Sadly,
All right. So let's move on to sword blocking. Remember I said this is a style that the shield is optional, the sword is really the thing. So we've got some core concepts for swords, just like we had core concepts for other stuff. Blocks should be perpendicular to the oncoming attack. So if you'll do a horizontal cut to my head over on this side, ideally I want to form a cross with his weapon. That gives me the best defense. Go ahead and throw a diagonal up down from that angle. Once again, I want to form a cross with his weapon. Go ahead and do it again. If I block like this, wow, that was just barely good enough, wasn't it? If I'd been like this, I'd be dead. So you really want to get that X against their attack if possible with your defense. The other side of that, of course, is if you're attacking someone, you want to throw parallel to their weapon. If you're defending, you want to form an X, because that's defense versus sliding by for offense. Let's see. So useful visualizations for blocking in general is most blocks can be categorized into two categories. You've got hanging guards. That's where the weight of the weapon is hanging down from your hand. It could look like this. It could even look about like this, because if I relax, it's going to the hanging position, basically. There's all kinds of positions that could be a hanging guard. We'll come back to some of those. But a hanging guard, the tip is lower than the hand typically, and you've got the weight hanging down from your hand. And there's vertical guards. Vertical guards are just the opposite. You've got the weight of the weapon pushing down into your hand. A true vertical guard would be like this, but you could hold it a little bit slanted, maybe about this much in any direction. So those are all vertical guards. And a guard is usually either a vertical guard or a hanging guard. Some useful visualizations that help you think about all the places you could block with your sword. One is for the hanging guard. I call it the cone or the umbrella. If your hand is above your head and your sword is hanging down in a slant like this, you have a cone of defense, a potential cone of defense that goes all the way around your head. You can literally block anything, back, front, side, wherever, all the way around your head with your sword from a hanging guard here. There is nothing that you can't block from the top of your head down to about your short ribs from this position. So it's a very useful one to think about. Another useful shape to think about with blocking, vertical guards now, is the cylinder. So here's the torso cylinder. If you allow your shoulders to turn, you can block pretty much 360 degrees all around your body from the top of the head down to the hips or so, pretty easily. Pretty comfortable. Then we have a low cylinder, which if you do a hanging guard about hip height, same thing, around here. Won't use this much in the SCA. You see it once in a while. If you were riding horseback, you'd use it to defend your leg and your horse. And it's nice if you're already up here in a hanging guard up here, and they go down, you can just drop it down and catch something with it there. Since we don't hit shins, we're not as worried about the hanging guards as much. Nice thing about the hanging guards, though, is from here, I can block all the way down to my toes by dropping the sword. From here, not so much. It's enough for the SCA, just barely, especially since we don't allow hits to the hand or below the knee. But speaking about real fighting, if the whole body's a target, your hanging guard is more versatile because you can block all the way down to your foot with it.
Well, you say touch the sword. So how you come in here?
My ideal hanging guard would be like that. Not so ideal would be like this. We'd like to do it, but ideally it's something like that.
Okay, so if you're here, you would have to drop your hand down.
Yep. Just try to form an X if you can. And it's, you know, you're going for the ideal. You're not always going to be right there, but that is what you're aiming for.
Would you want to block on the middle point weight of your sword too?
Not necessarily. And we're going to come back to that. We're going to talk about blocking with the flat of the weapon and how that changes things. All right. So next thing to talk about, two different aspects of defense, is static defense versus active defense. Static defense is already blocked by your guard position. So an example of static defense is, okay, here I've got static defense for my leg, for my shoulder, for my body, for most of my head. Without moving, I am covered from a bunch of things, right? A more typical static defense is probably like this. Some things are exposed, some things are covered, right? So, advantages of a static defense. It limits your, it limits your opponent's options for attack. Why chop at your body? It's covered, right? Or if you got it down on your leg, they're not going to throw leg blows because it's already covered with a shield. It's always on. So, I got my static defense, I go, oh, look, a squirrel. I'm still blocked. It doesn't matter. You know, and, you know, my leg and body, it's still covered by the shield. So even though I'm looking at the squirrel, I'm going to live. The disadvantages of a static defense, though, is that it forces your opponent to reach into the hard-to-block zones for their attacks. That's one of the interesting disadvantages of it. So,
Ass wrap, exactly.
yeah, if I am right here,
I'm sorry.
yeah, well, that's easy, right? If I come out like this, he's going to throw somewhere more complicated that involves a more complicated block for me, right? Because I didn't give him anything easy to throw at, so he's going to have to throw somewhere else. So I've given him some information. Now, active defense is moving to the blocking position while being attacked. So an active defense for my head would be that. As he threw the blow, I chose a movement and I blocked it with it. It encourages your opponent to strike at the easy to block targets. If I come in like this, why throw a wrap? You know, it feels funny to throw a wrap when all this is open, right? So he's going to throw the easy shot, which happens to be easier to block as well.
Would you want to use that as a feint, though? Like a body shot feint? If just coming out there pretending you're unprotected? Would that be wise or not really?
And how fast your opponent is. No, you're dead.
It keeps the exact nature of your block a secret and your potential repos from it a surprise. So we're going to go back into this a little bit more later, but go ahead and throw that again. Okay, I could have blocked it like that and thrown, right? Or, throw it again, I could block it like this and throw something else. I chose two different blocks, which gave me two different repos opportunities. He doesn't know which one of those is going to occur when he starts throwing the blow. Whereas if I come out with a static defense, he's got a pretty good idea of what I've got cocked up to throw right from the beginning. Disadvantages. So far active defense sounds like the way to go, but with an active defense, if I come walking in like this and I go, ooh, squirrel. Wow, it's gonna hurt. So you're open until you move to block. If you're caught unaware, you will be hit.
Which is to say, some people are very fast.
Yes, yes, indeed. And so and also with an active defense, you have to be correct about what they're doing.
Right.
So if you'll like feint over there but throw over there, and I go for my active block over here, I'm now dead because I made a mistake. I misread what he was going to do. Static defense can sometimes save you from those situations because you kind of had it all covered anyways. Although your better fighters are not going to throw into your defense. They're going to throw those hard to block shots. So he's going to feint for that hard to block shot behind your left leg, and then he's going to hit that hard to block shot on the back of your right skull. You know, so not only was there a feint, but they both went to complicated spots.
I'm trying to figure that one out too.
Trying to think about, yeah, there we go. I was trying to think of how to hit the back of your right skull from over here. I guess.
All right. So, active blocks can take a couple different forms. And the idea is to put these onto the figure 8, right? Probably the easiest way to think about how to put a block onto the figure 8 is to figure, okay, I know how to throw blows from the figure 8, right? So what if I throw a blow at their attack? So if you'll attack here, I throw a blow at his shot. I'm already on my figure 8. I can continue on into whatever I want to do. Throw one over there, say. Okay, so you're picking it up along the figure 8. You're throwing into it. The other variant of that, and I kind of accidentally illustrated it right there, is receiving the blow onto the figure 8 and then continuing on to your next shot. So you're locating blocks along the figure 8 pattern. I'll demonstrate these. Ideally, you'll be blocking the shot with the flat of your weapon. There are historical arguments as to whether this was done in period or not. People who think that it was that way, they would say because the edges of your weapons get all chewed up. These weapons got passed down from generation to generation. They were valuable. To protect that edge, you block with the flat of the weapon. That allows the weapon to flex when it gets hit rather than taking the full force and possibly snapping. That all sounds like good argument. Other people say, hey, you hit the flap, it's going to break at the tang. The sword is weaker that way. Yeah, there's all kinds of worries that people have. I don't know who's right. Okay, but what I can tell you is that if you block along the figure 8 with the flat of your weapon, you've already got your edge in line for the next thing you want to do, which is cutting your opponent, as opposed to having it pointing at their weapon and having to turn it and then make your cut. So it makes your response shot 1/8 of a second faster, which makes a difference. So that's why I block with the flat usually. I'm not religious about it. I'd rather block with the edge than not block at all.
The reason that I had heard not to block was because the dynamics of the hand, you have more strength
right.
in this direction.
The thing is, though, if you're blocking along the figure 8 and you block with the flat, you can allow them to push the weapon.
Oh,
You don't need to stop it dead. The mere fact that the mass of your weapon is beating the mass of their weapon will suck a good portion of the force out of the blow. But after that, it will get driven back towards you. It'll get driven back with the flat of your blade towards you, so that's safe enough, especially if you're in chainmail, but even without. And you're already in line along the figure 8 for your next blow, so no matter how far they drive it back into you, you've still got your next cut ready to go. So rather than trying to stop it dead, which is harder on the sword, by the way, you're letting them drive the sword back. You're absorbing some of the force by having it get pushed back, and you're still able to make your next shot. Yeah, I've heard that argument come up as well. Now, they didn't say in the few manuals we have that go back that far, block with the flat. We just don't know. And we do know by, like, Napoleonic era, they say block with the edge. So where did this come from? By the Napoleonic era, you had people that became soldiers in their late teens or early 20s or whatever, and tried to learn how to use a sword in a year and got sent out to fight, right? In the Middle Ages, you had people that were trained to the sword from birth, practically. Blocking with the flat is more complicated. Blocking with the edge, you can teach any moron to do it pretty much right away. Additionally, by the Napoleonic era, that moron goes out and fights his battle for you. If he makes it back alive, you look at that sword and say, that thing's trashed, and you get him another sword. They're not that expensive by the Napoleonic era. They're not a lifetime, lifetime heirloom. So it may not have mattered that the swords were getting chewed up by that time. So, I don't know. Leave it up to you as far as history goes. What I can tell you is blocking with the flat has some advantages in our game.
Soldiers.
So,
Those take a little longer.
let's see, we're going to go back.
Less likely to be locked.
Yeah, we'll go back and drill those.
Yeah.
Some options with blocking. One is a seating block, which is catching the blow early and letting it push towards you along the figure 8. So I like to use this against very fast opponents. So if you're going to snap me here, if he's super fast, like say Davin or something, I'm a little scared to wait till the last minute to catch that shot. I'm afraid it'll already be on my head by that point. So what I try to do, as soon as I see him twitch, go ahead and go again. I try to get the tip of my weapon out there near his. Go ahead and go again. So I try to get it out there. And he's still powering in, and I'm in an awkward position, right? I've just laid the flat in there. What I'm going to do, let's go ahead and do it now all the way, is I'm just going to ride it back. I'm going to let him throw his blow, but I'm going to get my tip out there on the weapon early and do what I call a seating block. You're seating the space to him. You're letting him push your weapon back, but you've already got it in place. This is very much like when you're fighting a pole armor, and you just sort of reach out with your sword and you lay it against their pole arm. So every movement they make, you can feel it. You're kind of already on it before they get it going, rather than sitting back and just trying to block all their pokes and things. And so against a really fast swordsman, get your weapon on their weapon early and ride it back so you have some control. Another useful thing to think about with blocking is facing the block. So if you're going to throw an offside shot on me, I want to turn my shoulders so I'm facing where the thread is. If you're going to throw an onside shot against me, I want to turn my shoulders so I'm facing where the thread is. Simply turning yourself to face where the thread is coming from is very advantageous to make it easier to block. Next is finding the repose from the block and turning blocks into blows. And this is where we start talking about our figure 8. So we're going to cover some specifics here. So, see, downward figure 8. All right, here we go, downward figure 8. Right there is a familiar position. Here's the downward figure 8. This should look very familiar to you.
Right.
Okay, so this block is on your figure 8 pattern. So I could come out static like this, I suppose, and you throw there, and what's my response? It's cutting diagonally down from here, which puts me right on my downward figure 8. I'm on the pattern right statically. Or I could lift to it, so you throw there, I lift right to that position, and then start into my figure 8 shot from there. Knowing where that spot is in relation to everything else that relates to that figure 8 makes it so that your block becomes part of your next blow. Now do that again. If I block like this, I'm not on my figure 8 really. I've got to turn like this so my sword is lined up along the figure 8 pattern. That's why I'm blocking with the flat, is it puts me in line for throwing the next shot. Another nice block along that side, a vertical block. Here's my upward figure 8. Okay. Right there is an obvious blocking position for an onside shot. So I can move to that position, and I'm right along the path for my upward figure 8. Let's see, offside shots. So here's an upward figure 8 with the hand fairly high. Right there, that's almost in the throwing position, is a very nice offside block. So if you throw to there, I can lift to that position from anywhere. Now I'm in my upward figure 8 blow. Right there. This is a popular one. This is a popular one with the greatsword folks. Right here or whatever. Block to there. Yep. All right. What are some other ones? Upward figure 8 again, I suppose. There's a block over on this side if you'll throw over there. Block here. So it's catching your block, and then you're either continuing on your figure 8 or doing a upwards teardrop is another way of thinking about the return from that block. That really covers the essentials mostly. Let's see. Yeah, I think that best covers it. I mean, the most often used one is this hanging one right here, or this one here against the onside shots. This is great when you can pull it off. It's once you've blocked like this, you've probably killed your opponent in your very next move. The problem is this is a little awkward, and you've got to be right. If you're wrong and they're throwing over here, you've got problems. So it's a little risky. But if you gamble right and you catch that block, you've probably got a kill on your next movement.
Which is why, as a left-hander, this right here.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I would think so.
Yeah, no,
They're busy snapping.
Yeah, because you're like,
Yeah.
and they come in and you're like, block, and
Yep, nice stuff. So there's lots of room to explore there, but when you're thinking about your figure 8s, think about the whole thing. You notice that some of those blocks, were way back here on the back end of the figure 8. And you can put that back end right in front of you if you want. It's still the back end of the figure 8 motion. The nice thing about the back end is you're in the back where you can wind up and throw your full shot. You're already wound up for your shot. As far as the front of the figure 8, that's throwing blows into your opponent's shots. Alright. So, this is a different way of thinking about sword blocking. You think about your opponent's attack as an opportunity to use one of your block to blow techniques. An opponent is best defended when they're on their guard, ready to receive your attacks. They are more vulnerable when they've committed to a particular defense, and more vulnerable still when they are executing an attack. This is because the key to being in the zone in your this becomes the key to being in the zone in your fighting. Everything your opponent does, attacking or defending, is viewed as a useful opportunity to you. So, to take it even farther there, when your opponent's in their position, that's a bad time to attack them. They're ready to defend. Everything's committed here. If you can feint and get them to commit to, say, blocking their leg, now they're a little more open, right? If you can get them to commit to attacking, they're also more open. Now, if you have a very good block to blow combo, them attacking you can actually be to your advantage. This is not always absolutely true. Sometimes your opponent is getting ready to attack you and they've got that little twinkle in their eye and you know that they've got some kind of feint or surprise up their sleeves. Well, let me tell you, that's what footwork is for. When your opponent is getting ready to attack you and you don't like what you see, use your footwork. Back up, circle, throw a shot into them to mess up what they're doing. Deny them the right to attack you when you don't like what you see. But when your opponent is attacking you and you like what you see, hey, they're going to throw a nice simple flat snap. I know exactly what to do with that flat snap to kill them. You let them do it. You stand your ground, you let them throw the flat snap, you catch it on your hanging lock, you've got a return shot. So you decide whether you're going to stick around and try to take advantage of what your opponent's offering you, or whether you're just not feeling right about it and you think you're going to back up and live to fight a second later.
I like that.
Yeah.
Live to fight a second later.
Yeah.
Not a day, but just a second.
Okay, so I've got a list of some tricky stuff and afterthoughts to throw at you. What time is it? How are we doing? Half an hour? Okay. We might get to cover some other stuff I don't always get to cover here. One very useful thing is combining a shot with a falling advance. Now that you've been through the class, you'll quickly understand what I'm getting at here. If you're in, say, a right lead stance and your weight is on your front foot, you've got maybe 70% of your weight to the front. If you release your front knee, you're going to fall forwards and down a little bit, right? So that's just like an advance. You fall forward and down, maybe a foot or so. So if I am just out of range, I can wait up and relax, and I'm in range, right? Now, I'm falling down. Well, going forward, of course, is good for throwing a sword blow. Adds power, right? Going downwards also adds power to any downward shot. So if I'm throwing a downward diagonal shot, I add power to it by falling forward like that. So by just relaxing the knee, I can close distance and I can hit harder. So, one good trick. Making short the distance on pole arms, something more experienced fighters will already know, but I might as well mention it for newer folks. If you hold your weapon like it's a pole arm there. If I'm like this, he's got free shots at me, right? Well, I'm still out at long range. What I can do, though, is I can lay my weapon out there and get it on his weapon so I can kind of feel what he's doing. And eventually, when I see a good time to do it, I'm going to try to run up, of course. That's what you end up doing against pole arms. That's mentioned in, I think it's a 15th century manual. They call it making short the distance. So for a shorter weapon against a long one.
Can I mention the Glazman counters for those?
Oh yes, there are always counters to everything. It's a matter of who thinks of what first.
Yeah.
Let's see. Partial blow to reverse. Oh yes. This is a nice trick. Someone was talking about a variation of this earlier today, in fact. I learned it down in Caid. I was fighting an Aiden belt guy, and he kept hitting me, and I was like, what is he doing? Oh, now I understand. Okay, so let's say that I want to throw this shot here, right? And to open that, I want to do something over here so that he thinks I'm going to throw an onside shot, so I've got room to throw my offside shot. Well, when I'm here, this is where I want to throw my shot from. If I throw a shot over here, it's going to take me longer to reverse and come back to here. But here's how the feint works. He locks everything in place. This is the shot he's going to throw. Nothing changes in relation to the body, the hand, the sword. But the body turns this way, which gives the impression that the sword is going for the offside shot, or for the onside shot. It also is winding me up to throw this shot harder.
That's what I realized.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a neat trick.
Yeah.
It changes the timing and it adds power to the other shot. And it sure looks like it's the onside shot when that twitch is made.
Do that one more time. So we're here.
Okay.
Oh. So
Yeah, it's
Turn the
with
body.
push the back.
Start squared up.
Right. Squared up.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
way. Sword straight back.
Think about the blow you're
And then
going to throw. Here you are. This is the sword blow you're going to throw.
Right.
So lock it in place
Okay.
and then turn your body the other way.
It looks like you're coming.
Right.
Oh! Oh! Okay.
There you go.
I got
Okay.
the joke.
Thrust, cut the thrust. We kind of talked about those already. Smooth acceleration shots are an interesting trick. We have certain instincts that have been bred into us since we were fighting a saber-toothed tiger.
Oh.
And one of those instincts is that when something's moving slowly and easily, people don't think about what kind of danger they're in when they're moving easily. Okay, if you move suddenly and explosively, even if they're untrained, they're going to tense up and respond. They might respond either by hitting you or by blocking. You never know which with an untrained fighter. But you don't want to trigger that. So if all of your blows start with a big hoo-ah, kind of, kai, jump in there, make big loud noise and move at them, you're going to get a response, and that may not be good. If your blows start out relaxed and speed up just at the ends, they're not going to trigger the same kind of response. So they start responding to the threat later, which makes you seem faster to them. You're not faster, but perceptually for them, they had less time to respond to the blow because they didn't perceive the threat until much later. And you can really exaggerate that. Like, okay, here's the blow I'm going to throw, right? So I'm going to start out real slow and then throw it. All of this part of the blow here might not trigger a defense. If I started out fast right from the start, they would begin blocking as soon as I started to move. But if you start out slow and set up the body back up for the shot and then release it, you're sucking away some of their defensive time.
Kind of like a boiling a frog.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. You go slow enough, they don't realize.
They don't
it's getting
realize
hotter.
that they're, yeah, because otherwise
Yeah.
they'll hop out of the pan. You're boiling a frog, you just do
You
it
just
slowly,
increase the temperature
slowly, and then...
Ooh.
Okay, another good trick is throwing into the wake behind an attack. You know how like a speedboat has a wake behind it in the water? You can think about swords as having wakes behind them. So if you get in like a high guard position, he's relying on his sword for defense, right? His mind has convinced itself that he's got some defense here, and he's got a shield down here. He knows what's covered. Now he wants to hit me in the head. Okay, at this point his mind's thinking about hitting me in the head, but somewhere in his subconscious, he still thinks he has defense here probably. He hasn't really readjusted to the fact that he lost that defense. So what you want to do is think about where the wake is going to be as he throws his blow and throw into the wake behind his sword. Because that's where he's most vulnerable mentally. He doesn't realize as much that he's vulnerable there. If anything, he may realize that he's vulnerable here, but he thinks that he's got the sword in the way because the sword's cutting. He thinks that the sword is at least giving him defense in that range there. But if you're intentionally throwing in right behind the sword as it comes in, you'll be hitting them where mentally they are least aware of their vulnerability. You, of course, have to block while you're doing that because they're throwing a sword blow at you.
Important.
Yeah. Important note. Right.
Do I keep getting in front of the camera?
Okay, jumping. Jumping with shots. Rising force, falling force. So I like to jump when I fight because I'm a little guy. Although I've seen big guys jump too. Changing your height by as little as 6 inches could make a big difference in whether a blow gets over a shield or doesn't. So when I talk about jumping and fighting, first of all, what I'm not talking about is like a basketball jump. You know, a basketball jump, you're going to get all crouched down, and you're going to get up, and then you're going to get all stretched out at the top and be as long as you can be, right? Woo! Like that. Great for basketball. Not good for fighting. When you're all stretched out like that, you're really vulnerable to getting knocked around. You're out of your stance. It's going to take a recovery time when you come back down.
Home run!
So, for fighting jumping, here you are in your bent knee stance. You're all grounded in the ground. Remember we talked about pushing with the feet down into the ground? Push with the right foot, push with the left foot. What happens if I push down with both feet? I bounce up in the air a little bit. Don't stretch out. Keep everything bent. Just shove down with the bottom of your feet. You'll go up in stance. You'll come down in stance. And you're only going to go up maybe 6 inches or so, but that's plenty. So, you'll hear people argue for one thing. What if you get hit while you're in the air? It's going to knock you back. Okay, just go in stance. Not a big deal. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing they'll tell you is you can't get any power in your shot while you're up in the air. Well, that's not true either, because we've talked about generating power by pushing up with our legs and generating power by dropping with our legs, right? So if you're throwing an upward motion shot, as you come off the ground, you're adding power to a shot like that. Like let's say I jump and throw a leg grab. Okay? Jumping creates the power, right? Downward facing shots, you drop them as your body's coming down off the jump. You've got your body weight on the shot. There's plenty of power available. You just have to know which power you're getting and apply it to the right kind of shot.
Ooh, that would really leave a mark.
Yeah.
Depends.
Why we wear armor.
Okay. Oh yeah, this is a nice one. Let's see. I can have you hold this. This is applying the circle of the body to hooking shields.
You look good with that. A little bigger. I'll make it.
Okay. It works standing. I tend to use this more when I'm kneeling, actually, but it works okay standing. Things tend to be a little too mobile standing for this to happen very often. But, okay, first of all, if I'm going to throw an offside shot, circle of the elbow, right? Circle of the body. If I put those two together, I can get a pretty good offside shot. Notice circle of the body means rotating my shoulders and probably my hips a few degrees, right? Okay, so here we are. We're fighting. I get back into this position to throw my offside shot. Notice that my shield is touching the edge of his shield. A classic shield hook would look like this. Close my shield up, throw a shot. Okay, that has a certain timing, and people get used to what to do about that. Instead, get here and just throw the shot. Lock the shield in place. Don't hook it. Just lock it in place where it's locked against your body. This is all tense through here, so it's not going this way, but it's also not going this way, right? And then throw your shot. Your shot involves rotating the body. So the rotation of your body creates the opening you need to drop the shot in. So that way the hook and the shot come in at the same moment rather than being a 1-2, which people have a response for usually. It has lots of power because your body's rotating on it. Even knee to knee with people, you'll find that you dump them over sometimes and you have to let them reset.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of power with the body turning.
And that's okay to hook the shields.
It is. If you do knock them over, good manners says you let them get up and keep fighting because your intent was not to knock them over. Your intent was to peel the shield over and kill them.
Technically, it's not even good manners. It's actually.
Yeah. Well, they should have been more stable.
They're dead. Both of that.
Theirs.
There is
Taking
actually
advantage of an opponent is actually expressly forbidden in the rules. Taking
yeah.
advantage of a defenseless opponent is also expressly forbidden in the rules.
Yeah.
When you're laying on your back going,
It says if you actually knock them over, even if you hit them, you should let them get up and do it again.
Can't say I've done that.
Crossing your opponent's sword to close the distance. If you'll get on your knees.
Sure.
The usual advice you hear fighting someone on their knees is throw shots as you come in so that they can't snipe you on your way in. Because you're vulnerable right here, right as you're closing range. You're kind of vulnerable to someone on their knees. And you have no need to put yourself through that. There are times where your sense is, for some reason, I don't want to come into range throwing blows. He looks tricky, I'm tired, whatever the reason is, I don't want to be throwing 100 blows as I enter range. So, I want to enter range passively, but I don't want to get killed. So the best answer to that is, one, static defense with your shield, shoulders down, so you've got your legs covered, because your legs are an easy target for him. And then you've got shield defense, or sword defense up here, right? If you think about crossing their threat as you come in, you'll have better coverage. So, his sword's like that. Now if he starts to shift, I continue to keep my sword crossed to his throughout the entire motion. If he just kind of moves around, I move my defense. As I'm stepping in, I try to keep that cross form. Even if he's not throwing, I try to keep a cross against his weapon. And that keeps him completely blocked out as you close range.
So basically, you're like a mime.
Yeah.
You're-
Yeah, you're trying to mirror. Absolutely.
I don't like them. Hey.
Okay, this is a really important one. To hit a target, you don't have to see it, right? If a guy's got a big shield in front of him, you can still hit his back. You don't see it, right? Okay, but your hand, the hand that's holding your sword, your hand has to have a view of the target. If your hand cannot see it, you can't hit it. It's interesting to think about. So if you'll hold the shield.
Yep.
Okay. I'll hold it out here maybe.
There.
Yeah. Here, my hand cannot see his head, and so I can't hit it. Here, my hand can see his head, and I can hit it. Here, I can maybe just barely see his head. If I get up here,
Good.
my hand can see his ribs, and it can hit it, even though I cannot see his ribs, right? So I need to give my hand a view of the target. There's a couple things that means. Defensively, it means you want to deny your opponent's hand a view of your targets, right? So that's where we get our kind of classic SCA fighting stance. If you'll get in high right, that's where the threat is at, right? So, and that's kind of the classic, this is what everybody does in the SCA, especially back in the old days. So back in the old days, the classic